others. I just played alone with toy instruments. We weren't a wealthy family, so taking music lessons was out of the question. In elementary school, I eagerly joined the wind ensemble and continued through high school. However, whenever we had to play as a group, I was always the one holding everyone back. This experience left me with a deep-seated trauma, making me uncomfortable in group settings, even beyond music. I found solace in playing an instrument alone, often retreating to a corner of the music room. My music teacher noticed this and introduced me to a well-known musician who recognized my rare talent. Unfortunately, my parents never understood or supported my passion, as we weren't well off. I often thought that with proper training, I might feel comfortable playing in a group. However, due to our financial situation, that was never an option. Eventually, I gave up on pursuing music professionally and settled for enjoying it as a hobby. When I received my first paycheck as an adult, I went to my first ever classical concert. I was a big fan of a particular family of musicians whom I deeply admired. The tickets were expensive, even for the worst seats, but I decided to go for it, thinking it might be my only chance. I had no regrets. The experience was worth far more than the price of the ticket, and I left feeling deeply satisfied. I'd love to go again if the opportunity arises, but I can't afford to buy expensive tickets regularly. I contribute a portion of my salary to my family and need to save for my wedding as well. Regarding marriage, I'm just waiting to meet someone who feels right. After working for 3 years, my parents have started hinting that I should think about my future. In the past, people usually marry in their late 20s to early 30s. My mom married my dad around that time too. Nowadays, personal choice is highly valued. My parents understand this and don't nag much, but their lack of pressure makes me feel like I need to hurry up and get married. Even after getting a job, I'm still shy and introverted. I've been invited to group dates by female coworkers, but never really talked to anyone. Just considering going on a group date is growth for me, so I decided to start with online conversations through a dating app. I met a guy who loves music, and we hit it off online. After exchanging messages for a while, he asked to meet up, and I agreed. When we met, I was stunned to realize he was one of the members of a famous musical family I admired. People might wonder why I didn't recognize him from his profile picture, but who would ever think it was actually them? His name was common enough not to raise suspicion. I figured if he knew I was a fan, he might turn me down, so I kept it a secret at first. Eventually, I opened up about my shyness and discomfort in large groups. He said, "I feel the same way." The more we talked, the more we connected, and we decided to get married. When I finally told him I was a fan, he said he was honored and his smile was radiant. Things were progressing smoothly, and we set a date to meet his parents. His family members were usually busy touring, but there happened to be one day when they were all home. Nervously, I entered his house and waited for his parents. His sister-in-law entertained me in the meantime. She said, "As you might know, we're a musical family. If you can't play at least the violin, you're not really part of the family, you know." I was in trouble. I had never touched a violin in my life, let alone played one. The school band club didn't have room for violins. Just then, his parents stepped in and said, if she has musical skills, any instrument will do. But his sister-in-law insisted on the violin. Then he said, "Mom, don't we have a practice violin? Can we borrow it?" And added, "Please give Betty and me some time for a quick lesson." His mother agreed. "Why not? It'll be interesting to see what you can do in about an hour with a string instrument, especially a violin." I wasn't confident I could make a sound in just an hour. "But trust me, Betty, you'll be fine," he said. I took his word for it and asked my mother-in-law if she'd lend me her violin. He had a practice room, and we spent an hour there. It was my first time with a violin one-on-one. Honestly, I was terrible, but "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" is a song I know well, so imagining it was easy. I focused on putting emotion into my playing since my technique was non-existent. "You're doing great, Betty," my mother-in-law said. "Just making the sound on the violin is hard. You've come a long way, especially considering it's your first time. You're giving the music the respect it deserves." He also said, "You move me," and gave me a big round of applause. The only one who seemed unimpressed was my sister-in-law. She probably thought I would embarrass myself and never expected me to win over her mom. As a result, I was welcomed into this musical family and officially became a married woman. My relationship with my father-in-law and mother-in-law is good, but a troubling dynamic with my sister-in-law is emerging. She frequently picks on me, makes snide remarks, and harasses me. She's very pushy and always retaliates if I try to stand up for myself, which I struggle to do, making her even more irritated. The harassment has only intensified. When the family was on tour, there were days when my sister-in-law wasn't performing due to the tour's schedule. On those days, it was just my sister-in-law and me at home. Although we had a housekeeper, my sister-in-law insisted that I cook. After tasting my meals, she criticized them as awful and poorly made. Even when she asked me to remake a dish, she would throw it away in front of me, claiming she didn't want to eat it anymore. She would even spill soup intentionally. Additionally, she would step on my back or put her foot on my head. During family dinners, she would often call me to the bathroom for no reason. "When will you learn proper table manners?" she demanded. "I don't want to share a table with someone like you." Although my husband, father-in-law, and mother-in-law believe I'm improving, she keeps saying, "I can't believe you can't even manage that." I don't think I'm as ill-mannered as she claims. Nevertheless, the sadness and frustration from not being acknowledged make me feel disheartened. After she leaves, I retreat to a quiet corner and wipe away my tears. My husband soon finds me and asks, "I was worried when you didn't come back." "Wait, why are you crying? Is she giving you a hard time? Don't hold back. Tell me everything." "What a sweet man," I almost said, but then I heard the joyful laughter from the family gathering and didn't want to disrupt the mood just for my own issues. If I could be patient, maybe it would help maintain the peace. "No, it's not like that. I get along with her," I said. "But you were crying." "I was just so happy to be married and accepted by everyone. I couldn't help but cry," I explained. My husband paused for a moment, then nodded in agreement. "Yeah, you're right." He took my hand and said, "Let's continue with dinner," leading me back to the table. It seemed like we might finally get some downtime from my father-in-law and mother-in-law. They even suggested attending a classical music concert as part of my welcome. Listening to various performers and interpretations from different conductors could be enlightening. They asked which concert I'd like to attend, and I recommended one they had previously enjoyed. They discovered they might be able to get tickets through a connection. However, my sister-in-law insisted on handling the tickets herself, claiming she had some influence with the people involved. On the day of the event, we arrived at the venue, and my sister-in-law went to the staff entrance. After a brief conversation with the staff, she returned with what looked like tickets. She distributed the tickets to everyone, but I didn't receive one. People who are broke wouldn't understand music anyway, right? "Excuse me, but you and I are on different levels. Know your place. Now go home. You don't belong here." My husband offered to check if there were any spare tickets available. However, not wanting to escalate the situation or make things uncomfortable for everyone, I decided it was best to leave and began to pull my husband away. "Wait, Betty, you're not the one who needs to leave. It's her who's always mistreating you," said my mother-in-law, who had been quiet until now. "Why me? Listening to music has nothing to do with being rich or poor. People have their own ways of enjoying it. It's not for others to interfere." My mother-in-law scolded my sister-in-law, who had always been cold toward me. "You think I don't know? It's clear something's been going on behind my back." "That's not true." "Really? I find your envious attitude far more impoverished," my mother-in-law retorted. My brother-in-law chimed in, "Aren't you always sleeping through concerts? It might seem like you're oblivious, but it's glaringly obvious," he chuckled. Sure, sister-in-law graduated from a music conservatory and won some awards, but she became complacent and stopped improving. You have to practice your instrument every day, or your skills will deteriorate. If you're going to lecture others on music, maybe you should first focus on improving yourself, my brother-in-law said. My brother-in-law regretted not being able to address his wife's lack of skill and attitude as a musician directly, but he couldn't bear the idea of causing harm to his brother's wife. "You have neither the awareness nor the ambition as a musician. I think it's time for you to leave our family. I'm tired of supporting someone with no promise of growth." It was an opportune moment for my sister-in-law to lash out. "You're one to talk, old lady. Your sense of music is so outdated that I can't even stand it. It sounds like something for the poor, so of course, I'd be thrilled to leave this awful musical family." Her words grew even stronger. She proclaimed she would go solo, make her own fortune, and prove everyone wrong. I thought people like her were incapable of self-reflection, but I didn't expect such intense rage. In the end, she stormed off, throwing a concert ticket to the ground as she left. My mother-in-law picked up the ticket and handed it to me. Let's go, she said, taking my hand as we walked together. My second experience at a classical concert was deeply moving. Different musicians and conductors brought unique vibes and interpretations to the same piece, making me wonder how the same composition could sound so varied. I discovered new interpretations and learned a great deal. My mother-in-law seemed to notice my enthusiasm. Meanwhile, the tension between my brother-in-law and sister-in-law reached a breaking point, and their attempts at reconciliation failed, leading to their eventual divorce. My former sister-in-law hastily organized her solo concert, disregarding advice. Overconfident, she rented a venue with a capacity of 5,000 people, a size rarely filled even by popular classical concerts. Unsurprisingly, ticket sales were poor, and she ended up buying many herself to make the hall appear less empty. Unsold merchandise left her with a warehouse full of stock. Her second solo concert fared no better, attracting only a handful of attendees. Lacking both talent and a likable personality, she faced widespread online criticism. Unable to pay her staff or cover other expenses, she quickly fell into debt. Her street performances were met with harsh comments like, "You're terrible, stop annoying us," and even resulted in water being thrown at her. My mother-in-law suggested that I should receive professional music training given my apparent talent. I was both surprised and delighted by the idea, though I felt it might be a bit late to start learning an instrument. However, it seemed like an opportunity I had thought I had missed was presenting itself once again, and I could hardly believe it. I was told I could choose the instrument, and I'm leaning towards the violin, especially since my husband has been helping me with it. My mother-in-law found an outstanding instructor renowned for nurturing many skilled violinists. I even began accompanying the family on their concert tours and assisting behind the scenes. Every day feels blissful as I immerse myself in music and notice my improvement. My current dream is to perform a solo with my husband accompanying me on the piano.
Mama, help me. What happened? Weren't you on a field trip? I don't want to go. I was stunned when my daughter, who had left the house smiling and ready for her field trip, came back home in tears. I couldn't understand why she was home. For a moment, I was completely at a loss. Seeing her in such a state, I spoke to her gently, and at the same time, a new question arose in my mind. How did you get back home? She was supposed to go to the amusement park by bus with her school. It didn't make sense for her to be back home 2 hours after she left. Choking back tears, she slowly replied, "I came back in a car. They told me to get off right in front of the house." A car. I couldn't hide my surprise and raised my voice. "Was it someone you know?" "It was Dad." "What?" I immediately called my husband, unable to stay calm. "Hello, what's going on? What do you mean Susie's back home?" "I don't know anything about that." The call was abruptly ended, filled with anger. I clenched my fists. "Can you tell me what happened?" "Yeah, look inside my backpack." Inside her backpack, I found a mess. The lunch I packed with her favorite foods was scattered everywhere, the lid open. The juice in her water bottle was gone too. Did Dad do this? Yes, I left Susie with a friend and headed to my husband's office. I couldn't forgive him for ruining the field trip she had been looking forward to. Bursting into his office, I was ready to fight for my daughter. "I'm Mindy, a stay-at-home mom in my 30s. I live with my husband Tom, who's 3 years younger than me, and our 6-year-old daughter Susie. But Susie isn't a child born to both of us. She's my daughter from a previous relationship. Maybe you should think about remarrying." "Yeah, still can't forget him. I lost my first husband in a car accident. For years before marrying Tom, my mom worried about me and suggested I remarry. But I just couldn't think about it positively. Back then, I was working as an office temp, doing my best to provide for my daughter. That's when I met Tom." "Aren't you working too much lately? Always staying late at the office?" "It's nothing new. I'm fine." "I'm worried about you. Let me help so you can finish up early." Tom had just joined the company and was always kind to me, honestly. I was trying not to get involved with men much at that time, but I couldn't push Tom away, probably because he reminded me of my late husband. "You don't have to pay so much attention to me, you know." "Why does that?" "Because I like you, Mindy." Huh, his sudden confession caught me off guard. "But I'm divorced, you know." "That's okay with me, and I have a child." There was a brief pause. and I thought I saw Tom's eyebrows twitch. It's okay. His words shook me. I was happy, but responding right away seemed too irresponsible. I can't answer right away. I understand. I'll wait for as long as it takes. When I got home, I was torn about what to do. Later, I made a proposal to meet my daughter. If Susie accepted him, I'd consider his confession. Hi, I'm Tom. I'm Susie. Nice to meet you. The following weekend, the three of us went out together. To my surprise, Tom and Susie's bond deepened more than I had expected, resembling that of a real father and daughter. Seeing this, I felt reassured and decided to give my answer. About what you asked before, if I'm okay, then yes, I'd like that. That's great. And so, we started dating. 6 months later, we got married. I was excited about our new life together, but marriage doesn't always go as planned. Our new life began in a home we rented, and Susie seemed happy, which put me at ease. However, that was only in the beginning. Now that we're married, I want you to be a stay-at-home mom, Tom said. What? Why all of a sudden? Susie is starting elementary school this year. Tom's expression turned irritated. Besides, working together in the same company is inconvenient considering what others might think. Maybe, but let's go with that. Okay. His earlier annoyance disappeared, replaced by a smile. Not wanting to argue just after getting married, I reluctantly agreed to his proposal. From there, our relationship gradually worsened. Okay, I'm off to the hair salon. Please take care of Susie. Sure, got it. See you later. Have a good time. And I left. This was the first time since getting married that Tom and Susie would spend time alone together. I was anxious but thought it would be fine since they seemed to have a good relationship. However, when I returned home after about 2 hours, the house was eerily quiet. I'm back. No response from either of them. Feeling something was off, I headed straight to the living room. There I found Susie lying on the sofa. Susie, huh, Mom? Oh, good. I was relieved and collapsed onto the floor. Susie had just been sleeping. Where's Dad? I couldn't feel Tom's presence in the house. He said he was going out and left me alone. What? I tried calling Tom, but he didn't answer. About an hour later, he returned. I'm back. I rushed to the entrance. Where are you? Oh, just went for a walk. What? Leaving Susie alone? Don't be so mad. Susie was asleep, and I just needed a break. But I couldn't overlook a certain change in Tom. That's quite a nice smell for just a walk, isn't it? I noticed a sweet floral scent, like body soap, coming from Tom. Must be your imagination. Saying this, Tom quickly headed to our bedroom. And when he came out, he had changed his clothes, probably to get rid of the scent. It was troubling to think the worst so early in our marriage. Why did you change? I got sweaty, and anyway, I'm hungry. Since then, I started to harbor doubts about Tom. He began avoiding us, and it pained me to see Susie looking lonely. It seemed Susie felt the same, sometimes showing concern for me despite her young age. Mom, are you okay? What's wrong? I'm fine. That's good. Were you worried about me? Thank you. I hugged my daughter gently. In this difficult life, her smile was my only happiness. It was my solace. Then came a night when I felt the most anger I ever had. I woke up suddenly and noticed Tom wasn't beside me. Thirsty, I was about to head to the kitchen when I heard Tom's voice. He seemed to be talking on the phone. Yeah, that's right. I'm tired, you know. I shouldn't have married someone with a kid. I only did it because she was pretty for her age. I was shocked by what I heard. I stood frozen in place. Tom had always been distant with Susie, but I never thought it was this bad. His complaints continued. Yeah, that's true. What should I do now, huh? No, that's going too far. I didn't know what they were talking about, but it couldn't be good. And lately, she's not as close to me. It really gets on my nerves. Maybe I need to show her who's boss. I was surprised at his awful feelings towards Susie, but my anger towards him grew even more. I thought about confronting him, but held back. Instead, I decided to record this conversation on my phone. When I got back to the living room door, he was still laughing and mocking us. I won't forgive this, so I recorded the conversation as evidence. Well, I'm going to bed now. See you. I quickly got into bed. I spent the night awake, unable to sleep. And it wasn't just Tom that was the problem. His mother was a big issue too. Mindy, aren't you thinking about moving in together soon? I'm sorry, but we don't have any plans for that right now. Has your husband agreed to this? I'll talk to him later. Sigh, I allowed my son to marry a divorced woman with a child. It seems Tom isn't keen on it either. That's because you've been saying things to him. No way. His mother thought I had stolen her precious son. Even Tom seemed a bit fed up with his overprotective mother. Originally, she had suggested we move in together as a condition for allowing our marriage, but it was my father-in-law who stopped it. That happened when we went to his parents' house to announce our marriage. You don't have to insist on living with us. That's not the point. Please be quiet for a bit. What matters are the feelings of these two. What do you think, Tom? I might consider it eventually, but for now, I want to live with just the three of us as a family. Then it's settled. Tom says so, so it should be fine. Thus, we got married and started our life as a family of three. But now, the hopeful person I was back then is gone, and I never could have imagined what would happen next. Here, this. What is it? Susie handed me a field trip notice when she returned from school. A field trip, huh? That's nice. Yeah, I'm excited. She looked genuinely happy, and seeing her like that made me happy too. Then Tom came home. What are you two happily chatting about? Susie's got a field trip coming up. Oh, where to? An amusement park in the next state over. Ah, that big place. It felt like a pleasant family conversation, which had been rare lately. Susie seemed satisfied talking and smiling with Tom. But at that time, Tom was thinking of something terrible to do using Susie's field trip. I'll be home late tonight, so don't wait until dinner, okay? Tom, who started coming home late more often, seemed unusually happy when he did return. Something good happened. No, nothing special. But again, there was the scent of body soap coming from him. I wanted to let Susie have her field trip without any issues, so I chose to tolerate it this time. Then, on the evening before Susie's field trip, I'm home. Ah, what a day. You're late again today. What, you got a problem with that? No, not at all. Oh, by the way, I'll be going into work in the afternoon tomorrow, okay? Got it. At that moment, I didn't think much of his words. Looking back, it was strange, but maybe my interest in Tom had faded, and then the next day. Huh? Tom, you're leaving already? I thought you were working in the afternoon today. Yeah, I was, but I have some things to do. So I'll be heading out early. With that, Tom hurriedly left for work. He seemed a bit flustered, but my attention quickly turned to Susie. That everything. Yeah. Then have a good trip. Bye, I'm off. Susie left with a beaming smile. She had been looking forward to the field trip ever since the day it was announced. Recently, she seemed a bit down due to my husband's behavior, but I thought this trip would cheer her up. But I was about to realize my mistake. It was about 2 hours after Susie had left. I guess she's probably at the amusement park having fun by now. As I thought this, I heard the sound of the door opening. When I went to the entrance, there was Susie saying, "Mom, help me." What? What happened? What about the field trip? I don't want to go. I realized this was no small matter. The smile I saw in the morning was gone, replaced by large tears. I couldn't understand why she was home, and for a moment, I was completely lost for thoughts, overwhelmed by her state. I gently spoke to her. Let's go inside for now, okay? Okay. I sat her down on the sofa and observed her, but she didn't seem to be injured. At the same time, a new question popped into my mind. How did you get back home? You were supposed to go to the amusement park by bus with your school. It's impossible for you to walk back home from there. Sobbing, Susie slowly answered. I came back by car. I was dropped off right in front of the house. A car. I raised my voice in surprise. Was it someone you know? It was Dad. What? I couldn't sit still and called my husband. Hello? What's going on? What do you mean Susie's back home? I don't know anything about that. The call was cut off abruptly, and I was filled with anger, clenching my fists. Can you tell me what happened? Yeah, look inside my backpack. As soon as Susie suggested it, I looked inside her backpack and found a mess. Her favorite lunch I packed was scattered everywhere, the lid open. Not only that, but the juice that should have been in her water bottle was also gone. Did Dad do this? Yes. Understood. I left Susie with a friend and headed to my husband's workplace. On the way, I got a call from the school. Is this Susie's mom? Actually, yes, I am. Is this about Susie? The teacher who called sounded panicked. In my anger towards my husband, I had forgotten that Susie's absence would naturally be a concern. Do you know anything? She just came back home a while ago. Back home? So that means. The teacher sounded like she knew something about the situation. Do you have any idea what might have happened? I heard from other students that a man took her away. I see. Anyway, my daughter is safe now. I'm really sorry for the trouble. I'm glad Susie is safe. There's one more thing I'd like to ask. After a bit more conversation, I hung up the phone. It was probably my husband Tom, who the teacher mentioned, and it seems like he did something outrageous. Maybe he acted on what he talked about over the phone before disrupting the field trip Susie was so looking forward to. I couldn't forgive him for that. All right, let's go. When I arrived in front of Tom's workplace, I took a deep breath. It had been a while since I'd been here. I knew where Tom's office was. Mindy. Oh, there was a colleague from my temp days, one of the few friends I had back then. What brings you here today? Just something. You're here for your husband, sort of. Still a happy couple, huh? I'll leave you to it then. My former colleague didn't know the situation, and it hurt a little, but I couldn't back down now that I had come this far. I burst into Tom's office. Everyone inside looked at me, including Tom. Why are you here? I came to see you. This is a workplace. Please leave. The office was abuzz with our unusual situation. I thought it might not be bad to let everyone know Tom's true nature here. I came to talk about Susie. That's something we can discuss at home. No, it has to be here. What nonsense are you talking about? Everyone here will find out what you did to Susie. Then, someone from the back of the office approached. It was my former manager. It's been a while. Hello. It's been a long time, manager. Please say something to her. The manager thought for a moment, then spoke slowly. No, I'll take responsibility here. You have an urgent matter, right? Yes, I replied confidently. So, why did you do that? Do what? Making a mess of Susie's backpack, then bringing her home. People saw it. He grimaced for a moment, then became defiant. Susie wasn't feeling well, so I brought her back, that's all. Then why were you at the amusement park? It's her first field trip to an amusement park in elementary school, right? I was just a little worried. That's a lie, isn't it? Why would it be? I just got a call from her teacher. You weren't alone, were you? Everyone in the office seemed even more agitated. There's no proof, right? Tom seemed determined to deny everything. That's when I decided to play the recording I had made previously, in front of everyone. Hey, what are you doing? I wanted to see if you could still be so composed after hearing this. I played the recording. It was as horrifying as ever. Words like terrible and worse could be heard from the crowd around us. Tom had no escape now. Is this true? No, yes. I was discussing a friend's problem. It's not like I planned to do anything to Susie. I couldn't help but smirk. But the word Susie isn't mentioned in this conversation, is it? Tom realized he had trapped himself. Unable to withstand the cold stares from those around, he suddenly began to apologize, changing his tune. I was just following orders. It's not my fault. It's my mother's. Orders? Yes, it's my mother's fault, not mine. I was shocked to learn that his mother had been involved in this, but it didn't excuse what Tom had done. As I was thinking about what to do next, my former manager made a suggestion. Just leave work early for today. Hey, this isn't a situation to work in, right? Don't come in until everything's resolved. It seemed like a good decision. Then let's go. Go where? Just come with me. I forcefully pulled Tom out of the office and headed to his parents' house. During the drive, Tom looked anxious, understanding what was about to happen. We finally arrived after about an hour's drive. I dragged a reluctant Tom out of the car and to the front door. Hello, his mother greeted us. It's been a while. Why are we here? We have an urgent matter to discuss, I said, heading into the living room. There, I found his father reading the newspaper. Hello, it's been a while. What brings you here so suddenly? There's something important you need to know, I replied. I made Tom sit down next to me and explained everything that happened today. You guys did all that? Wait a minute, that's just her fantasy, his father protested. I played the recording for his father too. So, what about this? Answer me, Tom. This was a conversation with my mother. Mindy and Susie weren't to my liking, so we thought to teach them a lesson. I just did what my mother told me to. I'm a victim too. Tom desperately pleaded with his father, but his father continued without batting an eyelid. Even if that's the case, you had the option to say no. By not doing so, you're equally guilty. And after all, you were the one who directly acted. Faced with this undeniable logic, Tom fell silent. Mom, what have you done? I did it for Tom and this family. Then the father-in-law, with a fury I had never seen before, bellowed, How can that be an excuse? What you two have done could leave a lifelong scar of terrible memories. The mother-in-law, taken aback by his fierce reprimand, couldn't muster a response. Get out, I said, leave this house. There won't be a second chance. But if you do that, what if Susie had been there? She would have undoubtedly burst into tears from the intensity of the moment. Mom, come on, Tom. Wait a moment. Tom was trying to hurriedly pull his mother away, wanting to leave the scene as quickly as possible. But I wasn't going to let them off that easily. I'm not done talking. I got a call from Susie's teacher. You weren't alone, were you? Someone saw you, right? You know about that too? I didn't do such a thing. Then prove it if you can. Dan. Looks like we have no choice but divorce, right? Tom was clearly not expecting me to say that. He was utterly hopeless. If that's the case, there's no need for me to hold back. Like I said before, you'll have to leave this house, and you're never crossing this threshold again. That's impossible. I'm sorry, but you'll have to accept it. It's all because of her. Don't blame me for everything. It's all your own doing. Eventually, Tom and his mother were disowned and kicked out of the house. She probably never thought it would come to this. They lost everything just because they couldn't stand us. What a pathetic mother and son! I think this should be enough. No, this is more than enough. My only worry is more about your wife than Tom. Leave her to me. She can't do anything now. You just focus on dealing with Tom. Yes, if you need anything, call me anytime. With that, I left my in-laws' house to pick up Susie. Mom, sorry to keep you waiting. It's okay. Let's go home. I took Susie and first headed to my parents' house. My mother was surprised but accepted everything after I explained the situation. Then I went to a lawyer's office to discuss divorcing Tom and his wrongdoings against Susie. I prepared the divorce papers and contacted Tom. The divorce papers will be arriving soon. Please take care of it. You're serious? Of course. I'm also going to ask for alimony. If you don't like it, prove your innocence. And I'm consulting a lawyer about what you did to Susie. Good luck with that. Hey, wait. I quickly ended the call. I was done dealing with a husband like that. 2 weeks later, the divorce was finalized, and I successfully claimed a substantial amount in alimony. As for his mother, you've caused us so much trouble. That's entirely your own fault. Maybe you should stop blaming others. Quiet. You and your daughter should go to hell. I'll return those words right back at you. As expected, she tried to contact me. She was speechless at my response. I barely held back my laughter and hung up, blocking her number. Months passed. How are things on your end? Susie and I are doing well. We'll visit you soon. That's good to hear. I look forward to it. From what I heard from my father-in-law, Tham and his mother were living together, still fighting over who was to blame. Such a hopeless pair. Well, they got what they deserved. Now it's just the two of us again. It's okay as long as I'm with you, Mom. Thank you. It was just Susie and me again, but it was for the best. Staying with a man like that would have been harmful to her upbringing. From now on, Susie and I will support each other and move forward together. At last, the day arrived when I could escape the constant sight of your face. Those freeloaders, who did nothing but consume without contributing, needed to go. They should be grateful for the charity they've received all this time. Understood. I declared, I won't be coming back. Thank you for everything until now. Swiftly, I gathered my essentials and bid farewell to the place I had called my in-laws' home for many years. As I left, my mother-in-law wore a satisfied expression, relishing my departure. However, only I harbored a certain poignant truth. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old and work remotely from home. Married to Alan for 5 years, our marital bliss took a turn in our 4th year when Alan's previously robust father fell ill, necessitating our presence and care. Initially resistant to the idea of living with my in-laws, I acquiesced due to Alan being their sole source of familial support. Despite contemplating quitting my job for his care, my company permitted me to continue working remotely, considering my past performance. The complications with my in-laws began immediately, familiarizing me with the notorious mother-in-law and daughter-in-law dynamic. Sarah, hurry up and tend to the cooking and cleaning. How long will you be lazy, avoiding your household duties? Scolded my mother-in-law. I'm working right now. What are you talking about? I'm always clicking away on the computer, I retorted. The truth was, amidst household chores and caring for my ailing father-in-law, I utilized my skills to regain my pre-crisis salary. After about 3 months of intense effort, when my earnings matched their previous peak, I felt genuine joy. However, the reason for my relentless dedication lay in the financial reality. Alan's income alone couldn't sustain us. Despite my hopes that life would finally ease up, the struggle continued. I contemplated setting aside some savings, but inexplicably, circumstances grew increasingly challenging. It felt as though the funds in my wallet were in a constant state of decline. Intrigued by this, I scrutinized our expenses and discovered that Alan had been indulging in lavish spending. Furthermore, my mother-in-law exhibited a penchant for extravagant habits. Alan, always eager to please others, extended his generosity beyond work lunches, using our credit cards to fund drinking parties. My mother-in-law, juggling numerous hobbies with friends, liberally paid for lessons and social gatherings. Despite their profligate ways, the burden of household chores and caring for my ailing father-in-law fell solely on me. I found myself covering all our living expenses with my income, making the prospect of saving money seem like a distant dream. Anxious about our financial situation, I approached Alan and my mother-in-law. Alan, mother, it seems we've been spending excessively. If this continues, we'll deplete our finances. Could you please consider cutting back on your expenses? I implored. In response, Alan and my mother-in-law harshly dismissed my concerns. I don't want to appear stingy in front of my colleagues and subordinates. Can't you understand that? Argued Alan. They won't think you're stingy just because you don't pay for them every single time, I reasoned. Maintaining good relationships with your coworkers is important, but what about the trips to the girls' bars? That has nothing to do with work, I pointed out. You just want to have fun, don't you? How about you come home drunk and start talking about it, even if no one asks you? That just means you have a more enjoyable time there than spending time with me. I expressed my frustration. My mother-in-law sided with Alan, laughing off my concerns. I'm glad Mom understands, and she's right, Alan asserted. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law justified her spending, stating, if I didn't go to my classes, I'd just be cooped up at home. I'm taking classes with my friends to enjoy the limited time. I found myself grappling with the harsh words echoing in my ears, labeling me as a terrible daughter-in-law. Their judgmental remarks centered on the fact that I dedicated myself to household chores without earning an income, rendering me, in their eyes, without the right to voice complaints. The notion of being looked down upon by a homemaker left me perplexed. In truth, I worked diligently, contributing a steady income to the household while also managing the housework and caring for my father-in-law. Their skepticism and belittling tone, asserting that working from home couldn't yield much, were disheartening. Even more so, my mother-in-law had apparently fed Alan a distorted narrative, implying that she alone took care of my father-in-law, painting me as an idle homemaker. The injustice of their perception left me speechless. Despite the countless moments when I contemplated leaving that challenging environment, the anchor that held me was my deep concern for my father-in-law. Since the early days of my marriage, he had consistently treated me with kindness, in stark contrast to Alan and my mother-in-law. His expressions of gratitude, acknowledging me as a wonderful daughter-in-law, resonated in my heart. Whenever he required care, he would apologize for the burden while expressing gratitude for my efforts. In these moments, I found solace and purpose in caring for him. I couldn't fathom leaving him to the whims of Alan and my mother-in-law. Father-in-law, it seemed, had been keenly aware of the family's dynamics, recognizing my contributions in maintaining our household's financial stability. His words of appreciation, acknowledging the importance of my efforts, became a source of strength. The anxiety about the fate of this household without my presence was overshadowed by the greater concern for my beloved father-in-law. Thus, I made the decision to personally provide dedicated care until my father-in-law's passing a year later. The somber occasion of his funeral became an emotional battleground for me. Despite my heartfelt grief, my tears were met with disapproval. "Why are you crying so much, Sarah? Father-in-law has passed away. Isn't mourning like this natural?" I was asked, but my response seemed to provoke irritation from my mother-in-law. She accused me of making it sound as if she had never taken care of him at all. The truth, however, was starkly different. My mother-in-law had hardly been involved in my father-in-law's care. Her preoccupation with hobbies and frequent outings left me as the primary caregiver. Despite my efforts, she portrayed herself as the oppressed and pitiful mother-in-law to outsiders, painting me as the cruel daughter-in-law. In the eyes of relatives, it seemed as though I was being too harsh on my mother-in-law. Even in the midst of mourning, I found myself criticized by those who understood little of the dynamics. Frustrated, I chose to distance myself from the relatives. However, this move did not go unnoticed by Ellen, who approached me with complaints. "You embarrassed Mom in front of everyone," he accused. "That doesn't make any sense. I was only crying about father-in-law's death. Despite that, your mom told me it was strange for me to cry. I never said she hadn't taken care of Dad at all. I just talked about mourning the loss of my father-in-law, whom I had always cared for," I defended myself. In the escalating argument, Ellen accused me of insulting his mother and suggested that if it bothered me so much, I should have cared for his father myself. The clash intensified, prompting the intervention of relatives who finally put an end to our quarrel. Following that incident, I maintained complete silence with my husband. After the funeral proceedings concluded, a lawyer arrived to discuss the inheritance. The lawyer began, "I'd like to discuss the contents of the will regarding your late father's estate. Firstly, to the wife and daughter-in-law Sarah, he's left half of his cash to each of you. To his son Ellen, he's left ownership of the family land and home." My mother-in-law questioned, "What if Alan gets the land and the house? Doesn't that mean all the other assets go to the wife? Why is Sarah receiving an inheritance? She's not related by blood." The lawyer responded, "Your husband was deeply grateful to Sarah for the dedicated care she gave him. He wanted to express his gratitude by giving her part of the inheritance. This decision cannot be changed." Unable to accept this, my mother-in-law accused, "I can't believe it. You were caring for him just to get the inheritance, weren't you? I defended myself, explaining, I had a good relationship with my father-in-law since I got married. I took care of him to express my gratitude. My mother-in-law continued with her accusations, suggesting it was psychological abuse. Frustrated, she eventually gave up, and the lawyer continued. So that was Dad's decision. It's gratitude for Sarah's caring, right? If that's the case, then we have no choice but to follow it. May I continue? As the lawyer proceeded, my mother-in-law's discontented expression turned into a smile, and she exclaimed, Yes, that's great. I understand. Confused, my husband questioned her. What do you mean? But my mother-in-law seemed pleased and explained, Now that Dad's living is over, it's no longer necessary to rely on Sarah. Her inheritance is nothing more than severance pay. We don't need her in this house anymore. My mother-in-law had misunderstood my father-in-law's will just as he had intended. In truth, he had discussed this plan with me before his passing. He wanted me to be free from the constraints of this house after his demise. Using the will, he cleverly deceived my husband and mother-in-law, making it seem natural for me to leave, just as he had planned. My mother-in-law, misinterpreting my father-in-law's intentions, saw the will as an opportunity to eject me from the family. Concealing my actual desire to leave, I responded to her shock by saying, Father-in-law, why would you treat me like this? Even to Dad, I was just someone taking care of him. Ellen, you can't understand Sarah anymore, right? Why don't you just divorce her? Looking at Ellen with tearful eyes, I pleaded, and after contemplating for a moment, he agreed, You know what? Let's get a divorce. I've inherited the family home and land, and Mom got some money too. There's no longer any need to worry about living, so there's no problem if Sarah goes. What do you mean by that? Just what I said. I feel bad for asking, but could you leave our house and agree to the divorce? Understanding that there was no place for me there anymore, I agreed. Understood. I guess there's no place for me here anymore. With a hint of restraint, I retrieved a document from the drawer and handed it to my husband. It was a notice of filing for divorce, prepared after our previous argument. My husband promptly signed it, expressing, Finally, I don't have to deal with you anymore. A non-working freeloader should just get out. You should be grateful for us having put up with you, a total freeloader. Is that so? Okay, I understand. I'll leave. Thank you for things up to now. As I left, my mother-in-law appeared elated, unaware of what would transpire in the future of their house. Once out of their home, I wasted no time and immediately submitted the divorce notice to the city hall. Arriving at the apartment I had rented in advance, the spacious room echoed with my joy as I exclaimed, Finally, I can be by myself. This is great. I felt overwhelmed with joy to be liberated from a challenging marriage. My heartfelt gratitude extended to my father-in-law for devising the plan that enabled my escape from my in-laws' home. Subsequently, I embraced a comfortable life living on my own, appreciating the newfound freedom and the ability to continue working remotely, a skill I had cultivated during my time at my in-laws' place. Having honed my time management skills, work flowed smoothly and my income increased, allowing me to lead a comfortable life free from interference. However, my peaceful existence took an unexpected turn when my ex-husband, Alan, called me out of the blue. Perplexed, I questioned, It's been a while. Why are you calling me? Weren't you the one telling me to disappear? Sarah, please help us. We're in a pinch, Alan pleaded. I chuckled, finding the situation ironic. What kind of joke is this? My salary hasn't changed, but for some reason, you're running out of money. We can't live like this. With a laugh, I decided to deliver the final blow. That's because you no longer have my income to support you. You squandered your entire salary on yourself. Maybe it's about time you and your mother learned some financial responsibility as adults. Confused, Alan asked, What do you mean? You still don't get it. I clarified. While you were living lavishly, my salary was the one paying for our living expenses. At that time, I was making about $4,800 a month. Now I'm earning even more than that with no one to get in my way. Expressing frustration, Alan pleaded, Sarah, can't we start over? It was a mistake to let you go. I want to make things right again. I scoffed. It's obvious you're after my income. Don't be ridiculous. I never want to see your face again. What happened to the inheritance your mother received? With that amount, she should be living comfortably. Alan confessed. It's about to run out. We spent it on a shopping spree, overseas trips, and half of it disappeared in the casino. Unmoved, I retorted. A foolish mother breeds a foolish son. I have nothing more to say to you. I'm a stranger now, and I can't do anything for you, nor do I want to. Desperate, Alan implored, don't be so heartless. Help me. This has nothing to do with me. There's nothing more to talk about. I'm hanging up. Don't call me again. I declared before ending the call and promptly canceling the contract for the mobile phone I was using. A year later, passing by my mother-in-law's house, I discovered it had become an empty lot, likely sold due to financial struggles. Unperturbed, I continued with my newfound spare time, attending a wine class I had long been interested in. There, I met a man 2 years my senior who took me seriously. After a year and a half of dating, we got married. He is the ace of a well-known company, humble despite his high salary, with a warm and wonderful character. We respect each other's careers, leading to a fulfilling married life. Reflecting on these changes, I can't help but feel that this retribution was, in a way, a gift from my father-in-law. 10 years had passed since my mother-in-law became confined to a wheelchair. Regular hospital checkups and physical therapy were routine for her. On this particular day, she was undergoing tests, and I found myself waiting in the hospital's waiting room before her therapy session. In the midst of my thoughts, a doctor suddenly pulled on my arm, a deep concern etched on his face. I'm going to speak with her primary doctor about this, he announced. Gently releasing my arm, I observed that the doctor in front of me was a man, whereas my mother-in-law's primary doctor was a woman. Confused about the need for a doctor who wasn't her primary to discuss her case, I questioned the situation. The male doctor hastily grabbed my hands, realizing my suspicion. There's something neither your mother-in-law nor her primary doctor should hear. That's why I only want to tell you, he explained. Intrigued, I took a step closer to him. My name is Julie, a 37-year-old office worker. Recently, I've been working remotely for a small and medium-sized company. However, the doctor's revelation seemed unrelated to my mother-in-law's condition. He continued, when I was a child, my mother left home, and I was raised by my father in a single-parent family. Despite my father's warnings about my mother being a spendthrift, I never felt lonely due to the love he showered on me. I eventually went to college and found a job, leading an independent life. 14 years ago, I married Mike. His mother warmly welcomed me into their family, treating me like her own daughter. However, tragedy struck when my mother-in-law was involved in a car accident, leaving her wheelchair-bound. Despite various caregivers, her condition deteriorated, and she expressed loneliness, prompting us to move back to care for her temporarily. As my husband and I visited her, she seemed relieved and began to smile. However, when we mentioned returning to work, her demeanor changed, and she didn't allow us to leave. My mother-in-law pleaded with desperation, her voice nearly hysterical. No, please, both of you don't leave. Don't leave me alone. Attempting to calm her, I assured, Mike really needs to return to his job, but I'll talk to my company and see if I can stay here a bit longer. I'll come back as often as I can. Just hang in there for me, Julie. With tearful eyes, she implored, if you can stay, that would be great. Mike, you better come back, okay? I'll be waiting. After losing her husband, she had endured loneliness for a long time. Our sudden notification of departure likely triggered anxiety and confusion. Her weakened state over the past week heightened her fear of facing loneliness. After discussions with my company, I decided to switch to remote work and operate from home temporarily to care for my mother-in-law. However, her aversion to being alone persisted. Even when I worked from home, she clung to me relentlessly. I couldn't let her be seen by my coworkers, and no matter how close we might be, she'd always be waiting where she could see me. It felt like I was under constant surveillance, leading to a growing sense of resentment. Meanwhile, Mike would come home on weekends and take days off during the week to assist with her care. Despite ongoing physical therapy, her condition showed no improvement, preventing my return to the office. Our personal lives became dominated by her care, leaving no time for just the two of us. The 10th year of this lifestyle marked her 65th birthday, and with each passing year, her dependency on us grew. My husband, unable to bear the situation, reduced his visits year by year. Even if I stepped out for a few minutes, my mother-in-law would panic, insisting I take her with me. Calming her down took ages, and I couldn't go back to our own home. Yet, I couldn't abandon the woman who had welcomed me without judgment or prejudice from a single-parent household. Then, a pivotal moment arrived. During a routine checkup, I accompanied my mother-in-law to the hospital as always. Dr. Mia, a woman in her 30s, had been her trusted doctor for a decade. When my mother-in-law went into the examination room, a young male doctor named Ryan approached me. Startled, he said, "Excuse me, you're Sally's daughter, right?" Sally was my mother-in-law's first name. Ryan explained that he recently joined the hospital and worked in the same department as Dr. Mia. Intrigued, I replied, "Yes, I'm her daughter-in-law. What's going on?" Ryan apologized for the sudden approach and requested a moment to discuss something about my mother-in-law. Curious, I agreed, realizing her appointment probably wasn't over yet. Agreeing to Dr. Ryan's request, he led me to a small private consultation room not far from the examination area. Motioning for me to sit, he took a seat across a small desk, fixing his gaze directly into my eyes. "You're currently living with Sally to take care of her, right?" Dr. Ryan inquired. "Oh yes, that's correct," I replied. I explained that for the past decade, I had been working from my mother-in-law's home while tending to her needs. The increased dependency had left me with little personal time, causing my husband to avoid coming home. Listening intently, Dr. Ryan nodded. I found myself expressing all the frustrations that had built up. Apologizing for the venting, I remarked, "I'm sorry for going on like this." Dr. Ryan reassured, "It's completely all right. Anyway, 10 years, that's quite a commitment." His face turned thoughtful, and then he looked at me with a serious expression. However, before his words could reach me, a scream from my mother-in-law pierced the air. Both Dr. Ryan and I rushed to the examination room, only to witness an unthinkable scene that left me speechless. Dr. Ryan urged, "You should leave that house as soon as possible. Get away from your mother-in-law." Suppressing my anger, I nodded, and without heading to my mother-in-law, I went straight to the police. Despite skepticism, they promised to investigate. I hastily packed my belongings from the house, the disturbing image from the hospital replaying in my mind. An hour later, while still packing, I explained everything to my husband over a call. Numerous calls and messages from my mother-in-law flooded my phone, but I continued to ignore them. In the evening, my husband and the police arrived, and that's when I finally answered a call from my mother-in-law. Angrily, she demanded to know why I had left her behind. With a firm attitude, I informed her, "I realized I don't need to live with you anymore. I'm going back to the house where my husband is." Indignant, my mother-in-law ranted and raved. With a sigh, I responded, "Why don't you just walk back home from the hospital? After all, your legs are fine, so you don't need a wheelchair or care, right?" As I continued explaining, my mother-in-law let out a short scream, conveying her extreme upset. I could vividly imagine her emotional turmoil as I disclosed the revelations I had discovered. I shared with her the unsettling information that Dr. Ryan had conveyed and the first-hand experience of witnessing an unexpected turn of events. Dr. Ryan had revealed that recent tests showed no physical issues with the muscles or nerves in her body. Instead, he speculated that her belief in her inability to walk might be psychological. The power of such beliefs could be formidable, and Dr. Ryan considered both physical and psychological care for her legs. In his efforts to include me as a family member in the care plan, he had called me over. However, it turned out that my presence wasn't necessary. During our conversation, a scream echoed from the examination room, my mother-in-law's. Dr. Ryan and I hurriedly went to check the room, finding her gesturing as if swatting away an insect. To our surprise, it was a false alarm. She had mistaken dust for a bug. In a surreal moment, she picked up the motionless dust and walked to the trash can, revealing that she could walk without the need for a wheelchair or cane, moving with astonishing ease. Dr. Ryan pushed me to the corner of the hallway, and we observed silently as my mother-in-law, seemingly unaware of our presence, calmly returned to her wheelchair. Dr. Mia entered the room, exchanged an envelope with my mother-in-law, and, acting nonchalantly, pushed her wheelchair toward the physical therapy facility. Stunned by the unfolding events, I stood frozen until Dr. Ryan gently shook me out of my daze. He had advised me to leave my mother-in-law's house immediately, and I hurriedly packed, desperate to escape this surreal revelation. Throughout my narrative, my mother-in-law remained silent. Finally, with an audible sigh over the phone, she began to speak, perhaps realizing she couldn't evade the truth any longer. Acknowledging the car accident that initially left her wheelchair-bound, she admitted that thanks to treatments, she could walk with the aid of a cane about 5 years after the incident. Listening in disbelief over the speaker, my husband and I were stunned. What puzzled us most was the purpose of the 12 years we had spent caring for her. She expressed her fear that once we discovered she could walk, we would leave her side. Tearfully, she admitted, "Julie, Mike, I couldn't bear that thought. I feared losing you both, and that's why I kept up the pretense. I truly love you like my own daughter." My mother-in-law had often expressed her loneliness after Mike moved out and my husband passed away. Despite her repeated pleas, our hearts remained unmoved. While we understood her feelings, we believed the way she went about it was wrong. Apologizing, we explained, "We can't be by your side any longer. Sorry, Mom, Mike, but the way you went about it was wrong." I continued, expressing my own sentiments. "I've been taking care of you for the past 10 years while working. My colleagues have experienced promotions, marriages, and childbirth. Because of your care, I couldn't have a child of my own. I had almost given up on having kids, but now I feel like the past 10 years are in vain. Why did you deceive us to the point of having us care for you? We would have visited you during our time off. Why did it have to be this way?" Though I didn't mean to blame her, tears welled up as the words poured out. With my husband supporting me, I conveyed that I no longer intended to care for her. We decided to leave her house that day and cut off all contact. Despite her protests and hysteria, we hung up, contacting the police, who assured us they would begin an investigation. 2 months later, while at a hospital with my husband, Dr. Mia, my mother-in-law's supposed doctor, rushed over to us. We remembered her with fuller cheeks, but now she looked gaunt and fatigued. Curious about her presence, we reluctantly listened as she approached with a desperate look. Dr. Mia revealed that she knew all along that my mother-in-law's leg was healed. She had accepted money to provide a false disability diagnosis. The money was in the envelope she received from my mother-in-law that day. Due to a recent complaint by Dr. Ryan, the hospital discovered her forgery and fired her immediately. Furthermore, she faced potential arrest for fabricating medical records, and her medical license was likely to be revoked. Incredibly, Dr. Mian insisted that the money wasn't an appreciation gift from my mother-in-law, but hush money from my husband and me. She alleged that we plotted to scam disability pension by making my mother-in-law disabled. However, there was no evidence to support these claims. It was shocking to realize that Dr. Mia, facing legal trouble, had shifted the blame onto us. In disbelief, I responded, "What are you talking about? We haven't done anything like that." Dr. Mia persisted, claiming it was the truth. "I'm going to tell the police everything." Dr. Mia shouted, her eyes red with rage, making us turn pale. While her claims lacked evidence, Proving our innocence would be challenging, and the mere thought terrified us. My husband and I were on the verge of tears when a woman approached us, standing between Dr. Mia and us, shielding us from her wrath. Aren't you the head doctor here? I urgently need to talk to you, she said. Upon seeing the woman, Dr. Mia turned deathly pale, quickly putting on a forced smile and approaching her with flattery. The woman glaring at Dr. Mia was the head doctor of the hospital, and she was Yvonne, my mother. Yes, my mother, from whom I was separated as a child due to her divorce, was now a doctor and held a prominent position in a major university hospital. She was one of the people advocating for revoking Dr. Mia's medical license upon learning about her misdeeds. Oh, you're related. In that case, could you please just hear me out? Dr. Mia begged, trying to invoke my mother's sympathy. However, my mother shook her head, stating, "Don't mess with me. You and Sally have been deceiving the hospital and the authorities for 10 years, keeping my daughters confined at home. Sally kept them at home because she was afraid to be alone. You, on the other hand, funded your debts from your nightlife with Sally's disability benefits. You frauds need to face appropriate punishment and make amends." Dr. Mia's plea was abruptly dismissed, and realizing there was nothing she could do, she slumped to the ground in despair. Whispers and stares from those around us focused on her, and we couldn't help but watch with indescribable feelings. Suddenly, a strong pull came from behind, startling me. I turned around to find, astonishingly, my mother-in-law standing firmly beside my father. My father angrily shouted at my mother, demanding, "What have you done to Julie?" I was taken aback, wondering why my father was there and why with my mother-in-law. When I heard that Sally was looking for Julie, I wanted to help. "You moved to a place without telling me, and I thought I would meet you if I followed Dr. Mia," my father explained. The reason I hadn't told my father our whereabouts wasn't just because of the family connection between my mother-in-law and him. Since my mother-in-law's car accident, I had asked my father to look after her when I was out for work. During those times, they became close and started dating secretly behind our backs. I had found out about this last year, suspecting their relationship when I saw them talking closely at my in-laws' house. "Give Julie back. I won't let you take her away," my father yelled at my mother, an intensity I'd never seen before. Brushing off his grip, I shouted, "Stop it. I know all the stories you told me about Mom are lies." My father's face went pale at my revelation. Since the divorce, he had been feeding me lies about my mother to ensure I didn't want to meet her. The stories about her treating him like a slave or leaving him for a younger man were all false. My mother, an accomplished doctor, always had a busy schedule, and my father knew this when they married. However, after I started daycare, his attitude shifted drastically. Blaming her for our lack of family vacations, he decided to divorce her, claiming she wasn't a good mother. On my 4th birthday, my father suddenly took me and left home. In reality, it was him who left, not my mother. Following the divorce settlement, even though my mother had a decent income, she couldn't guarantee time for raising me. My father was nominated to live with me. However, my mother had been sending a substantial amount in child support every month. I didn't know this until I met my mother. Even after becoming a single parent, my father ensured I didn't want to see my mother by portraying her in a negative light with false stories. It seemed that my mother wanted to see me, but most of the time, she was overseas for training or research. She kept sending me letters from overseas that my father kept refusing, hiding the letters. There were times when it seemed they might meet, but something always came up. Either my mother got an emergency call at the hospital, or my father would come up with an excuse to cancel at the last minute. I had been told since I was young that my mother couldn't be reached, or that no one knew where she was. It turned out that was a lie. The reason my father could afford to travel once every 2 months and pay for my high school and college tuition was thanks to the child support money from my mother. Our comfortable life was all thanks to her. So the story of my father working late nights was also a sham to make it seem like he was struggling with parenting. He'd work a regular 9-to-5 job, then spend nights somewhere, coming home only in the early morning. When my father yelled, Where's your proof? My mother calmly showed him a mobile bank app, saying, "This is how much I've transferred to you over the years for Julie, and your company unusually has strict policies against second jobs, so it was impossible. I can confirm with them if you'd like." My father crumbled, and my mother-in-law tried to comfort him. Seeing my father like this made me realize that I had been lied to my entire life. While the truth was shocking, I felt more anger than anything else. I said coldly, "Thanks for everything, Dad, but it's time to say goodbye." Saying that, my father clung to me, and my mother-in-law said, "Julie, your dad did everything he thought was best for you." No, he did it for himself. He lied about struggling as a single parent, using the money from my mom. And you lied to my husband and me, trying to bind us to your home. Both of you are a perfect match for your lies. Please stay away from us. With no excuses left, my father and my mother-in-law were speechless. Ignoring their stunned faces, we left the hospital with my mother. Later, Dr. Mia was arrested and lost her medical license. She had forged medical documents multiple times and was sentenced to imprisonment. Additionally, the hospital she worked for is suing her for defamation. My mother-in-law had bribed a doctor for a fake diagnosis, leading to her having to pay back all the pension money she received with interest. She's also facing fraud charges, as informed by the police. Mike says he's cut ties with her, so he's not bothered about her future. I'm trying not to care either. As for me, I realized I had been somewhat dependent on my mother-in-law. Feeling betrayed sent me into a mental spiral, so I've been seeing a therapist at the hospital where my mother works. Regarding my reunion with my mother, when I was getting a referral at my previous hospital, the doctor's name I was referred to was the same as my mother's. To my surprise, it was actually her. My mother was skeptical when she saw a patient named me, but during the consultation, she realized it was me. Our reunion can only be described as miraculous. I can't be treated by my mother due to hospital rules, but she supports me from behind the scenes. I've been back to my job at the office while still attending therapy. When visiting Dr. Ryan, who informed me of the truth about my mother-in-law, I heard that he and my husband were old high school buddies. We now often hang out with Ryan visiting our place, and everything feels like old times. It may be hard for me to forget how I was tied up by my mother-in-law and my father. But my husband, my mother, and Dr. Ryan always encourage me to take things easy and do what I want. Thanks to that, I'm planning trips with my friends or going to cafes by myself. I'm Sarah, a 40-year-old mother of two, wedded to my rock, John, for almost 2 decades. Our life's been a thrilling yet challenging journey, and it's the companionship in these times that truly counts. However, things took a turn with the unexpected arrival of my younger brother Tom, a 32-year-old who's still figuring life out, often making impulsive decisions. It was a typical Sunday, with our family congregating at Mom's house, a place brimming with childhood nostalgia. As we were savoring Mom's delightful roast and her tales, Tom barged in, unexpectedly accompanied by a young, pregnant woman named Lisa, his fiancée. This sudden revelation, amidst a peaceful family lunch, caught everyone off guard. Lisa, youthful and visibly pregnant, was dressed more for a party than a family gathering. This news stunned everyone, especially my kids, Emily and Max, who were curious and bewildered by their new aunt-to-be and her sparkling attire. Tom's announcement of his engagement and impending fatherhood brought a tense silence to the room, only broken by John's attempt at congratulatory words. Tom declared their plan to stay at Mom's temporarily, which visibly worried her. It was like observing someone unwittingly edge closer to a precipice. That night, John and I discussed the situation. He expressed his concern about Tom's irresponsible behavior and the strain it was putting on my mother. The following days were chaotic, with Tom and Lisa overstepping boundaries, while Mom tirelessly catered to their needs, visibly worn down by their lack of gratitude. One evening, I found Mom in the kitchen, her fatigue evident. I'd urged her to stand up for herself, but her maternal instincts towards Tom and his unborn child made it impossible for her to turn them away. I felt an overwhelming urge to confront them, to expose their exploitation of mom's kindness, but I restrained myself. In family dynamics, love often means overlooking the obvious faults, even when it's detrimental. This became our new reality: Tom and Lisa, the inconsiderate house guests, and the rest of us tiptoeing around to maintain harmony in a home that now seemed constricting. Our days were upended by Tom and Lisa's presence. Each morning was greeted with Lisa's loud grievances about her discomforts or cravings. She'd saunter into the kitchen, still in her nightwear, demanding breakfast without a hint of courtesy. "Sarah, whip up some pancakes, will you?" The baby's craving them, she'd order without a please. I'd clench my teeth, trying to maintain composure. "Sure, Lisa." Just after I prepare Emily and Max for school. Tom was equally unhelpful, idly lounging, his attention fixed on his laptop or video games, occasionally shouting for food without a glance our way. Mom attempted to mediate, reminding me they were young, but I couldn't overlook their blatant sense of entitlement. As Lisa's due date neared, the situation worsened. She left clutter everywhere, engaged in endless phone gossip, while dishes and laundry piled up. One day, I reached my breaking point. Finding her in the living room, feet propped on the coffee table, I confronted her. "Lisa, this isn't a hotel. You can't just expect everyone to clean up after you." Her response was a dismissive eye roll. "Chill, Sarah. I'm pregnant, remember?" Tom's defense was swift but infuriating. "Laid off her, Sarah. She's carrying my child." Mom intervened, pleading for peace, but the unfairness was glaring. She was exhausting herself for their sake, yet remained unheeded. They treated our home like a free-for-all, leaving messes and responsibilities for Mom, and even had the audacity to plan an extravagant wedding, expecting Mom to foot the bill. Their disregard for Mom's well-being became intolerable. Even after the birth of their son Alex, their behavior didn't change. One morning, I walked in to find Mom tackling a pile of dirty dishes, while Lisa idly watched TV and Tom was absorbed in his phone. I asked Mom why she was burdened with all the work, but the answer was all too familiar. The cycle of disregard and exploitation seemed endless, leaving me grappling with frustration and concern for my overburdened mother. I questioned Mom, trying to maintain composure, but her response only added to my frustration. "Lisa needs to rest, and Tom's busy," she said. Turning to Lisa, I pointed out her lack of contribution, but she retorted with the excuse of her recent childbirth. Tom, disengaged as ever, defended her, claiming ignorance of their hardships. I was incredulous at their audacity. Sitting idle and burdening Mom was their idea of being busy? Mom attempted to diffuse the tension, claiming she didn't mind the extra work, but my patience had worn thin. I'd argued that Mom was not their servant, but my words fell on deaf ears. Tom and Lisa continued their routine, frequently leaving the house, burdening Mom with their child, and flaunting their extravagant purchases. Discovering a receipt for an expensive dress, I confronted them about the financial burden they were placing on Mom. Tom's indifferent shrug and Lisa's smug attitude were infuriating. They saw nothing wrong in exploiting Mom's generosity. Alone with Mom, I pleaded with her to see the situation for what it was: exploitation. But her maternal instincts blinded her to their irresponsibility. "I can't abandon them, especially not Alex," she said. Despite my efforts to persuade her, she remained steadfast in her belief that they needed her help. Feeling helpless, I watched the family dynamic deteriorate. Tom and Lisa continued their parasitic behavior, while Mom, ever the selfless mother, couldn't recognize the extent of their exploitation. The situation reached a breaking point when Mom suddenly fell ill. One day, she was her usual self. The next, she was bedridden and weak. I stayed by her side, offering hopeful words, but inside, I felt a growing anger towards Tom and Lisa, who were conspicuously absent, likely squandering more of Mom's resources. I expressed my outrage, but Mom's response was tinged with sadness. "They have their own lives, Sarah," she said, her voice weary. Her condition worsened, and eventually, Mom passed away quietly in the night. I was there, but Tom and Lisa were absent, likely enjoying themselves, oblivious to our family's loss. The funeral was a blur, a mixture of grief and resentment towards my absent brother and his partner. Their absence during Mom's final moments and their continued disregard weighed heavily on me, underscoring the profound disconnection within our family. I recall the moment Tom and Lisa arrived at the funeral, their appearance more fitting for a celebration than a solemn occasion. Lisa's attire was notably inappropriate, drawing murmurs from the crowd. John offered me a comforting squeeze of the hand, trying to provide some support. Post-service, Tom urgently wanted to discuss Mom's will. His insistence, so soon after our loss, left me aghast. He claimed Mom had left the house to him, a statement that seemed incredibly presumptuous and insensitive given the circumstances. My protests about respecting Mom's memory fell on deaf ears. Tom was adamant about his entitlement. The following day, I visited Mom's house to gather her belongings, but I was met by Lisa's sneering face at the door. She coldly informed me that the house was now theirs, claiming Tom had inherited everything. Tom's appearance, confirming the claim with a smug grin, sparked a mixture of anger and disbelief in me. I felt alienated, standing at the threshold of my childhood home, now claimed by my callous brother and his wife. Determined to seek justice, I found myself nervously entering the notary's office. The whole ordeal, grappling with Mom's loss, and now this dispute with Tom, seemed like a nightmare. Mr. Jacobs, the notary and an old family friend, greeted me with a solemn expression. As I voiced my doubts about Tom's claim, Tom and Lisa arrived, exuding arrogance. Mr. Jacobs began reading the will, and my anxiety peaked. When he reached the part about Tom, he announced a bequest of only $5,000 to him, a revelation that visibly shocked Tom. Mr. Jacobs then continued, to my relief and surprise, declaring that Mom had left the family home and the remainder of her estate to me. This unexpected turn of events was a small solace in the midst of our family strife, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the grief and turmoil that had enveloped us since Mom's passing. The revelation in Mr. Jacobs' office left me feeling a mix of relief and vindication. Lisa, on the other hand, was incensed, incredulous at the idea that they weren't left the house. Mr. Jacobs informed us that Mom had made this last will only a month ago, due to her concerns about being pressured by certain family members. Tom's reaction was one of rage and denial, but there was a sense of justice in the air. Mom had seen through their exploitation. Tom accused me of turning Mom against him, while Lisa threatened legal action. Mr. Jacobs warned them about the possible legal repercussions if coercion was proven in any earlier will. Their confidence seemed to falter at this. As Tom and Lisa left the notary's office in a huff, I stayed behind to express my gratitude to Mr. Jacobs. I left feeling a whirlwind of emotions, sorrow for losing Mom, relief that her final wishes were honored, and anger at Tom and Lisa's audacity. Back at the house, Tom confronted me, infuriated by the disparity in our inheritance. I tried to explain that this was Mom's decision, likely influenced by their continuous financial demands. His frustration was palpable as he demanded to know why Mom would screw him over like this. Then I found Mom's letter, tucked away in a drawer. It explained everything. Mom had initially set aside an equal share for both of us, but as Tom and Lisa's demands increased, she began to deduct from his portion. By the time she wrote her last will, Tom had already received most of his share through these advances. Tom was shocked and in denial, unable to accept that his actions had led to this outcome. I was firm, my patience thinning, as I confronted him with the reality of the situation. He sat, overwhelmed by his own actions, pondering the gravity of what he had done. The weight of his choices and their impact on Mom's final decisions was a harsh reality he now had to face. As I set the letter down, a blend of pity and frustration washed over me. "You've only yourself to blame, Tom. This was your doing," I said, watching him leave the house, a shadow of the man he once was. There was a sense of justice in his departure, but it was tinged with sadness for a family now fractured by both grief and selfishness. The house, previously a battleground of family conflicts, now stood in a haunting silence. Tom and Lisa had left, severing all ties with me. It was a relief to be freed from their tumult, yet it also left me to grapple with the fallout of their actions. As I sat in the living room, lost in thought, my phone rang. It was Jenna, bringing news of Tom. He was job hunting in town, and Lisa seemed to be living a single life, with no sign of their son, Alex. Anger surged within me at their reckless disregard for their child. Jenna's voice broke through my fury, suggesting that maybe there was something I could do. Her words ignited a spark of determination in me. I had to fight for Alex. He deserved a better life. The next day, I met with a lawyer, Ms. Rivera, a straightforward and determined woman. I laid out my case, my resolve firm. I want to pursue custody of Alex. He's in a toxic environment, I told her. Ms. Rivera, sizing up the situation, agreed to help, though she warned it wouldn't be easy. The ensuing legal battle was arduous, with Tom and Lisa oscillating between cooperation and hostility. But I remained steadfast. John's support was unwavering, his arms a haven of comfort after each challenging day in court. "You're doing the right thing, Sarah. It's hard but necessary," he reassured me. The day I was granted temporary custody of Alex was filled with mixed emotions. He was a sweet, bewildered boy, but gradually he began to adapt to our family. Emily and Max quickly grew fond of him, and he brought a new joy into our home. Tom's reaction was one of anger and resignation. "You've taken everything, Sarah," he accused. I stood firm, knowing I was protecting Alex, a responsibility Tom had neglected. As Tom walked away, I realized our relationship might never recover, but this was about Alex's well-being, not our sibling rivalry. With Alex, life took on a new dimension. There were challenges, of course, but also moments of laughter and love. He was slowly becoming a part of our family, and I was resolute in making his presence permanent. Looking back, I knew despite the hardships and challenges, we were building a brighter future, one filled with hope and the love of a family reunited under new circumstances. Making the decision to bring Alex into our family was undeniably the right choice. It marked a new chapter for us, an opportunity to heal, grow, and foster a future brimming with love and stability. This was the legacy I yearned to create, a vivid departure from the selfishness and discord that once loomed over us. Our home, once a symbol of family strife, was now alive with laughter and the joyful sounds of children. Alex had seamlessly integrated into our lives, his presence a beacon of happiness. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, his innocent question about staying with us forever warmed my heart. "Yes, Alex, you're part of our family now," I assured him, and his contented smile was all the confirmation I needed. John, standing by the door, shared a look of pride and fulfillment. "He's really fitting in," he observed, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of achievement. We were providing Alex with the life he deserved. The next day brought the exhilarating news. The court had granted me full custody of Alex. Overwhelmed with emotion, I thanked Miss Rivera profusely. The family's reaction to the news was a beautiful sight. Emily and Max embraced Alex, and even John was visibly moved. "We're a complete family now," he said, voice laden with emotion. The journey had been tumultuous, but it strengthened us. While I occasionally thought of Tom and Lisa, hoping they would find their path, my priority was our children and our family. In the following months, Alex flourished, transforming from a timid child into one filled with confidence and joy. One day, while playing in the garden, he presented me with a dandelion, proudly announcing his wish for us to be together forever. Holding him close, I assured him that his wish had indeed come true. Looking around at my family, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. We had navigated through the storm and emerged more robust. Our future was a canvas of hope, love, and endless possibilities. This was our story, a testament to the resilience of family and the transformative power of love. It was a future bright with promise, and we were more than ready to embrace it wholeheartedly.
Greetings. Am I exhibiting a lack of open-mindedness, or is my spouse perhaps displaying excessive naivety? A dispute has arisen between my husband and me, leaving me emotionally drained. My name is Alice, and I find myself in my 30s. My husband, Martin, and I share the responsibility of raising our daughter, Nia, who is on the verge of entering the 3rd grade. Our familial unit, previously including my retired father, now numbers 3, as my father has embarked on a 2-year overseas assignment offered by a certain company. The discord originated with the prospect of accommodating my nephew, Philip, who is set to commence his college education. Given our proximity to his chosen institution, Martin was approached with a request for Philip to reside with us during his academic pursuits. The proposition entails his stay until he achieves financial independence through part-time employment, yet specifics regarding the required savings or timeframe remain elusive. Personally, I harbored reservations about sharing living quarters with a young man whom I encounter primarily during extended family vacations. My home-based professional responsibilities further diminish my enthusiasm for the notion. Upon voicing my concerns to Martin, his response was unforeseeably defensive. His retort questioned my lack of trust in Philip, leading to an impasse where neither party was willing to yield. Initial discussions involving Martin, Thomas's wife, and Philip himself had exhibited unanimous support for the idea. Philip explicitly expressed his desire to be under our care. Martin, however, appeared oblivious to the underlying complexities, dismissing any apprehensions about Mia and regarding the situation with unwarranted optimism. Our disagreement persists, with no resolution in sight. As the proprietor of the house registered under my name, I proposed deferring the decision until my father's return, urging a collective discussion. Martin, however, resisted this proposition, asserting that involving my father was unnecessary and advocating for a swift resolution over the phone. This stance, coupled with his encouragement for Philip's independence, raised doubts in my mind regarding the sincerity of Martin's intentions. The house, though aged, offers ample space, leading me to suspect clandestine discussions between Martin and my in-laws, with Martin striving to maintain a favorable impression on Thomas. Communicating via text during work hours, Martin suggested that the decision could be made without involving my father, emphasizing the surplus of rooms available. Despite my reservations, Martin remained steadfast in his opinion, refusing to budge until a decision was reached, thereby exacerbating the existing deadlock. It is disconcerting to contemplate anyone's displeasure upon discovering that their relatives have been relocated to their residence without consent, especially when they are not present. Martin, however, exhibits a noticeable lack of comprehension. When I inquired about the possibility of our relatives residing rent-free simply due to familial ties, he asserted that they were willing to remit $200, deeming it sufficient for one person. The basis for the in-laws' notion of adequacy remains unclear, as I am convinced that this amount is inadequate by any reasonable standard. The question arises, does $200 cover only monthly groceries? I limit the absence of prior consultation between Martin, Thomas, and me. If only they had sought my input earlier, I could have engaged in a thorough discussion with my father. However, I suspect a reluctance to consult him in advance, perhaps due to his benevolent yet stubborn nature, leading them to anticipate certain conditions. My apprehensions deepen as I entertain the thought that clandestine machinations have been underway since they learned of my father's overseas assignment. Seeking counsel, I decided to confide in a trusted confidant, my close friend Rosalie, a relationship spanning back to our middle school years. Recognizing the gravity of my situation, Rosalie promptly adjusted her schedule and suggested a private setting to ensure our conversation remained confidential. It felt serendipitous as we hadn't caught up in a while. Initially engaging in light conversation, we eventually delved into the heart of the matter. I recounted the entire narrative to Rosalie, detailing Philip's request to move in while pursuing college, with vague assurances of financial independence. Martin, seemingly receptive, deferred the decision to me. Complicating matters, our residence is registered in my father's name, and he is currently overseas, adamantly refusing to engage in any discussion on the subject. In addition to these complexities, I have the presence of my daughter Mia at home, and the prospect of accommodating a male relative who is essentially a stranger leaves me uneasy. Given that the house is registered under Dad's name, securing his approval is undoubtedly imperative. My suspicions regarding the timing of this proposition intensify, particularly as it coincides with Dad's absence from the country. Overwhelmed with emotion during our conversation, tears clouded my ability to articulate my thoughts comprehensively. Nonetheless, Rosie, my attentive confidant, offered unwavering support. With occasional back rubs and gentle encouragement, she urged me to continue sharing. Rosie, after absorbing my account, proffered her insights and counsel. Emphatically, she advised seeking Dad's input before making any decisions. She admonished me for contemplating acquiescence after the fact, highlighting the importance of Martin and Thomas respectfully requesting this favor. Addressing the absurdity of a $200 rent, she questioned the lack of clarity on shared responsibilities such as cooking, laundry, and utilities. The prospect of shouldering these burdens, especially with Martin's frequent work-related absences, raised valid concerns. Whether Martin was cognizant or oblivious to these considerations remained unclear. Rosie, in support of my perspective, pledged assistance if needed, expressing genuine understanding. Buoyed by this interaction, I resolved to discuss the matter with Dad. Martin, however, preempted my decision with a text, absolving himself of responsibility and leaving the decision to me. In response, I firmly conveyed my decision to decline. Martin, perplexed, challenged my rationale, insinuating an aversion to inconvenience. His response, devoid of coherence, aligned with Rosie's earlier assessment, a lack of genuine commitment to assuming responsibility. Realizing the need for a more substantive conversation, I determined to engage with Dad at the earliest opportunity. Martin's underlying concerns about potential conditions were evident. Even if Dad agreed, stipulations such as a curfew, household contributions, and academic diligence would likely be imposed. Given Philip's involvement in karate, weekend attendance at classes might also be required to instill discipline. Failure to meet any of these conditions could prompt Dad to insist on Philip's immediate return to his home country. Yet, in the face of potential conditions, I acknowledged that if Philip truly required this favor, my inclination was not to be perceived as heartless. The following day, I reached out to Dad as planned. Understandably uncomfortable with the notion of someone residing in his home while he was away, he refrained from granting permission. Instead, he proposed involving a real estate agent to facilitate an alternative solution. After concluding my call with Dad, Martin returned home, coincidentally with Thomas, who happened to be in town on business. Seizing the opportunity, I relayed Dad's stance, stating that we couldn't accommodate Philip, but suggested seeking the assistance of a real estate agent to find him suitable accommodation. My directness provoked fury from both Martin and Thomas, who were evidently incensed by the change in plans. They expressed frustration, asserting that their relocation plans were imminent. Martin, in a fit of anger, questioned the need to involve Dad in the decision-making process. As Mia attempted to intervene, Martin's response escalated to the point of physical aggression. In a protective gesture, I interceded, only to be met with a forceful kick to the chest. While I feigned a retaliatory punch, I never intended harm. Martin, deflecting blame, asserted that Mia's fall was solely my fault, attributing 90% of the blame to me. Expressing bewilderment at the sudden upheaval in our harmonious cohabitation, Martin left for his parents' house. Parting with a defiant declaration, he warned against characterizing him as changed or abusive, shifting blame to my actions. Despite Mia's relatively minor injuries, my chest pain persisted, prompting a hospital visit the next day. A broken rib was diagnosed, and a medical certificate was obtained. Concerned for our safety, I requested my aunt's presence and took basic security measures, installing a simple lock. Life has undergone a drastic shift, with Martin opting to commute from his parents' house. He conditions his return on my apology and convincing Dad to allow Philip to stay. However, my sentiments towards Martin have cooled considerably. I believe cohabitation could be manageable if Thomas allowed us to live separately with occasional assistance. The insistence on living together remains perplexing. I question the fragility of familial bonds and whether distant blood relations should supersede the well-being of close family ties. Despite my contemplation, answers elude me. For now, my primary focus is ensuring a safe environment for Mia. Even if Martin were to return, my concerns persist, and divorce is now a consideration. My best friend, Rosie, was correct. The idea of letting a relative, even a family member, reside in a house under my dad's name is unthinkable. I plan to seek advice from my dad again. An update 2 months later. Following heated arguments about allowing my brother-in-law's son to move in with us for college, the divorce has been finalized. After informing my dad about the details, he expressed his intention to return to the country. I had a conversation with Mia, explaining that we would no longer be living with Martin due to the divorce. Though she seemed saddened, she didn't voice any opposition. Witnessing her emotional response tightened my chest, both physically from my rib pain and emotionally from the strain. In my search for legal representation, Rosie once again proved invaluable, connecting me with a divorce attorney. Martin, since returning to his family home, maintained complete silence, ignoring my texts. When Dad and Martin finally spoke over the phone upon Dad's return, Martin insisted that the broken rib was 20% my fault and 80% mine, claiming victimhood. Resisting further inquiry, Martin asserted, "I don't owe you any explanations." When the topic of divorce arose, he was initially defiant, telling me to proceed if I wished. However, during mediation, Martin's stance softened, leading to a settlement involving compensation for the divorce, child support, and damages for the abuse towards Mia and me. In a surprising turn, Thomas reached out to apologize, and revelations about Martin's undisclosed actions came to light. Initially, Martin had promised to contribute $200 for Philip's living expenses, a detail he had withheld from me. As it turns out, Martin was in discussions with his in-laws about them providing him with approximately $800. In essence, he was attempting to siphon off funds from them, explaining his vehement insistence on having us all live together. While Martin enjoyed golfing, a seemingly expensive hobby, I believed he was managing within his personal budget. The revelation that he harbored a love for gambling, particularly horse racing, dating back to his college days, came as a shock. Neither during our dating nor after our marriage did he display any signs of this inclination. Unbeknownst to me, he had been secretly accumulating debt, amounting to around $20,000, which left me stunned. Upon learning this, Thomas understandably expressed fury, condemning Martin for taking advantage of their kindness and exhibiting far worse intentions. Thomas questioned how Martin could resort to violence and emphasized that his change in behavior likely stemmed from the fear of his debts becoming public knowledge. When Thomas confronted Martin, he proposed a solution. Martin could stay at their old house, contributing some funds for living expenses while commuting. Thomas naively trusted Martin and felt gratitude, assuming the arrangement was settled. Upon revisiting this with his wife and acquaintances, they realized the imprudence of their behavior and extended a thick envelope as a gesture of apology. Clearly, it contained apology money. However, forgiveness towards Martin was not on my agenda. Despite being unaware of these financial matters, I still harbored trust issues towards Thomas. In my view, if they had the means to prepare that much money, they should have supported their son from the outset, aiding him in becoming self-sufficient and preventing the current predicament. I politely declined Thomas's offer, and he extended his apologies once more before leaving. Several months post-divorce, Mia and I have been attending counseling twice a month. Dad's return overseas prompted occasional requests for support from my uncle and his wife, contributing to a sense of stability. However, an unexpected letter arrived from Martin. Despite my initial reluctance to open it, I sighed and decided to read it before discarding it. The letter was disconcertingly self-serving, with Martin expressing regret for losing his temper and acknowledging his financial struggles. He insinuated that honesty might have offered a solution, questioned Mia's loneliness without a father, and asserted his commitment to change for the better. The letter concluded with a suggestion to reconsider living together as a family once his debts were settled. Recognizing the self-serving nature of the letter, I shared it with my uncle and his wife. Concerned about potential risks, they promptly contacted a lawyer to arrange a restraining order. The terms stipulated that any future contact from Martin would incur a demand for $1,000 in emotional damages each time. The threat of reporting him to the police for stalking was formalized in a document sent to Martin. Though apprehensive, my uncle and his wife assured me that they would handle the situation. In an unexpected turn, my in-laws, perhaps feeling guilty, are cooperating and monitoring Martin. Seeking Thomas's assistance through the lawyer revealed that Martin is currently mentally unstable. While still employed, he occasionally mutters to himself, causing worry even to Thomas, who has facilitated his counseling. The realization that Martin had taken out loans in secret and could resort to violence brought relief for the decision to divorce. Gratefully, I can work from home without financial concerns, and Mia is gradually settling emotionally while attending school. Hoping for calm days ahead, I aim for a peaceful life moving forward. My name is Ashley. At 32, I find myself deftly managing a desk position at a modest firm while also overseeing the affairs on the domestic front. Gilbert, my husband, and I encountered each other through mutual acquaintances, and we've now celebrated 3 years of marital bliss. The initial honeymoon euphoria has dissipated, leaving behind a settled tranquility. Our day-to-day existence is predominantly stress-free and harmonious, a cocoon just for the two of us. Ashley, did you truly infuse the suplex flavor with chicken bones and vegetables? My sincere apologies, but the entrance and the bathroom were not attended to with the meticulous care they deserve, revealing an aspect of upbringing that warrants consideration. Are you paying attention? During the summer hiatus, I found myself obligated to sojourn at my in-laws, where I assumed a role akin to a servant under the scrutinizing gaze of Carolina. Each respite brought forth a litany of critiques, a ritual that seemed to accompany every significant break. I perceived it as a norm, considering the challenges encountered by friends with their own mother-in-law dynamics. Patience, I believed, would eventually quell these discordant moments. Around that juncture, Robert, Gilbert's brother, entered matrimonial bonds. Robert, a reserved gentleman in stark contrast to the more effervescent Gilbert, welcomed into his life Sarah, a youthful and modern beauty 12 years his junior. The union, albeit seemingly unconventional, filled Carolina with exuberance, heralding the first Christmas with the newlyweds. As they were occupied with work until Christmas, the plan was for Robert and Sarah to join us then. Consequently, I found myself extending my stay at the in-laws' abode from Christmas Eve onward. This decision, however, intensified Carolina's zeal to delegate tasks and oversee preparations for the impending festivities. Are you still engrossed in cleaning? At this rate, Christmas will arrive before you complete your chores. Hurry and prepare the gratin, she chided. Oh, I can hardly wait for tomorrow. She's my son's young wife, and I must acquaint her with the intricacies of our traditions," she added with evident anticipation. Observing Carolina's fervor, I sighed in silence, a sympathetic witness to the impending induction of Sarah into the fold. On the morrow, I endeavored to assist Sarah, offering empathy rather than sheer jubilation at our shared circumstance. Around noon the next day, Robert and his wife Sarah made their entrance. Despite Sarah's seemingly flamboyant demeanor, her demeanor exuded courtesy and left a favorable impression on me. In contrast, Carolina appeared preoccupied, diligently searching for any lapse on Sarah's part. First impressions, it seemed, held paramount significance. Ashley swiftly served the coffee and commenced preparations for the Christmas feast. "And you, Sarah, follow suit," Carolina directed, prompting a startled reaction from Sarah. "A son's wife belongs in the kitchen, doesn't she?" she added, guiding her son and his wife with a stern look.
I, a 26-year-old woman, was set to be married last week. However, the wedding didn't take place because I made the decision to run away the night before the ceremony. I had been engaged to my 26-year-old boyfriend for 6 months, and we had been in a relationship for 3 years. We'd also shared 2 children, twin boys who were now 1 year old. The arrival of our unexpected twins had initially caused tension, as my boyfriend was against having kids at that time. Despite his reluctance, I insisted on keeping the babies and gave him the option to leave without demanding child support. I believed in my ability to raise my children independently due to my strong maternal instinct. Over time, my boyfriend came around, supporting me throughout the pregnancy and proving to be a good father after the twins were born. 6 months later, he proposed and I accepted. We began planning our wedding, and everything seemed perfect. My parents were thrilled, as they liked my now ex-boyfriend. However, the night before the wedding, a phone call changed everything. We were following the tradition of staying in separate places, and after a heartfelt conversation, he forgot to hang up the call. I remained on the line out of curiosity and overheard a conversation between him and his father, revealing a side of him that made me question our 3-year relationship and the impending marriage. I decided to eavesdrop on their conversation, motivated by my ex-boyfriend's dejected and distant tone when confirming to his dad that he was talking to me. Something felt off, and the subsequent exchange still echoes in my mind a week later. His dad questioned whether my ex still felt the same way as he did 2 days ago, and my ex affirmed. His mother joined the conversation, insisting that regardless of his feelings, he needed to go through with the wedding. This sparked a heated response from my boyfriend, asserting his autonomy and refusing to be pushed around. His dad, however, made a weighty proposition, stating that while they couldn't force him to marry someone he didn't love, they could cut him out of their will. His mother, in turn, lectured him about responsibility, emphasizing that as a father, he needed to grow up and commit. She argued that if he was ready for kids, he should be ready for marriage. My ex expressed his frustration, feeling coerced into marrying me despite not feeling ready, solely to avoid being disinherited. He lamented about the lack of consideration for his readiness for milestones in his life, feeling unfairly pressured into situations he wasn't prepared for. In his complaints, he stormed out, leaving his phone behind. His parents continued to discuss his perceived irresponsibility, prompting me to end the call. Stunned and unsure of what to do, I realized that my boyfriend had agreed to marry me under the threat of disinheritance, a revelation that shook me on the eve of our supposed wedding day. I couldn't fathom the situation for the next couple of minutes. None of his recent behavior had hinted at his unpreparedness. Yes, we had our initial argument when I discovered my pregnancy, but since then, he had been a devoted boyfriend and father. His true feelings were hidden behind a remarkable acting facade. Once I gathered myself, I made a swift decision to escape. Fortunately, my kids were with me, so I drove to a hotel on the outskirts of town. Arriving late, I settled my fussy kids and blocked my boyfriend and his family without explanation. That night, I cried, realizing the past year had been a colossal lie. Eventually, around 4 in the morning, I found some sleep. The wedding expenses were covered by my ex's affluent parents, relieving me of financial concerns. I texted friends and family that the wedding was off, promising to explain later. I made it clear I didn't want them involved with my ex or his family, trusting they'd respect my wishes. On what was supposed to be my wedding day, I stayed in the hotel, grappling with my emotions and finding solace in my son's company. Despite my devastation, I maintained a strong front for their sake. A day later, I returned home to gather my belongings and move out. After leaving my kids with my parents, I faced my ex's expected reaction. He appeared sleep-deprived, panicked, and concerned. Unsure of the authenticity of his emotions, he demanded an explanation for my actions, asserting that my decision warranted an apology to him and his family, dismissing cold feet as an unacceptable excuse for humiliation. I didn't say much. I simply informed him that I had overheard his conversation with his parents the other day. He appeared confused for a moment, and when it sank in, he couldn't hide the shame. I didn't feel the need to elaborate or engage in further conversation. After uttering those words, I entered the house while he waited outside in the yard. Gathering the essentials, I left without exchanging another word. There was nothing left for me to say. He had acted according to his beliefs, and now I was doing what I believed was right. I no longer aspired to be a wife. My focus shifted to being a devoted mother. Almost a week passed without communication, and I thought it was the end for us. I had nothing to express, and he seemed to share the sentiment, or so I believed. However, a few hours ago, he unexpectedly appeared at my parents' place, pleading to speak with me. By now, my parents and close friends were aware of the situation, and they hesitated to let him in. Despite their reservations, I agreed to talk to him one last time. I opted to stay in the front yard, fearing a heated argument that might disturb the sleeping babies. In our conversation, he apologized for everything he had put me through. He professed his love for me, admitting he wasn't ready for marriage. He expressed affection for our children and insisted on being a part of our lives despite the revelations from that night. I found myself at a loss for words, grappling with doubts and trust issues. While he wanted a second chance without his parents' interference, I was uncertain about the path forward. He expressed a desire to work things out, but I couldn't ignore the deception that had persisted for almost a year. Now faced with the decision of whether to give our relationship a second chance, I'm torn. I want my kids to have a relationship with their father, but trust is a significant hurdle. As for myself, a break seems appealing, especially after this tumultuous week. I'm undecided about the future of our relationship. Update. Hey, everyone. It's been a while, and I appreciate the overwhelming support. I've been busy with work, kids, and moving out. The advice I've received has been incredibly helpful. I consulted a lawyer about custody arrangements, and I've decided to pursue full custody. Some people have sent hurtful messages, accusing me of being a selfish mother for considering reconciliation. I want to emphasize that I'm a mother, but I'm also a human being. It's only been a week since that phone call, and moving on completely is a process. This was a 3-year relationship, for goodness sake. In the throes of strong emotions, I genuinely loved him, and that vulnerability led me to consider reconciliation. However, as I've regained stability, I recognize the imperative of prioritizing myself and my children. Despite the initial hurtful judgment on the internet, I anticipated it in this digital age. 2 days after calling off the wedding, I began the search for a lawyer, a process that took time as I sought someone I felt comfortable with and could trust completely. Custody discussions were never part of our prior conversations, as we never foresaw such a circumstance. Now that we're at an impasse, I believe it's crucial to take legal measures to secure my children's well-being. While I doubt my ex's desire for custody, I'm wary of his conservative and orthodox parents who may object to their son not having custody of their grandchildren. I'm preparing for potential challenges. Our last conversation was around 3 days ago, and the lack of contact since then reinforces that, regardless of his words, he's not ready to be with me or willing to make the necessary changes. His recent expressions of wanting to make things work appear hollow and meaningless. The eroded trust between us makes it clear that I won't be with a man who doesn't genuinely want to be with me. Ending the relationship is the best course of action. I plan to communicate my decision soon, hoping it won't escalate into a custody dispute. Update 2. I've informed my ex that I won't be getting back with him and that I intend to file for full custody. I assumed he would understand, given his earlier admission of not being ready for marriage or kids. However, he reacted poorly, engaging in arguments and insisting I couldn't make this decision. I expected him to appreciate not being forced into something he wasn't prepared for. But his reaction has heightened the challenge. Oh, okay. Good on you for managing preschool then. I got her in because I was diagnosed with depression after my husband's death. I got a doctor's note and everything. Wow, I didn't know that was an option. Anyway, the reason I came today is that I need advice. Elizabeth's next statement left me shocked. Would you mind paying our property taxes? What? What property taxes? Where is this coming from? We don't have money to pay property taxes. Why would you think we'd pay it for you? You said we could ask you for anything, didn't you? Well, yes, but plus you guys were the ones who insisted we live on that land. We never insisted. Regardless, property taxes for that land are higher than other places, and it's really causing us problems. Why don't you just work a bit and pay yourself? I can't work. I've even got Emily in preschool based on the excuse that I can't work due to mental illness. That's not our problem. Please, if we can't pay the property tax, we won't be able to live in that house. Look, I don't know all the details, so I'll discuss it with Robert when he gets home. Please do. After showing up out of the blue and making such an unexpected request, Elizabeth left. When Robert got home, I told him about Elizabeth's sudden visit and her asking us to pay property taxes. Of course, Robert was surprised, but he was also angered by her audacity. A few weeks later, we invited Elizabeth over to our house to discuss something important. We timed it so that her daughter, Emily, was at preschool, allowing the three of us to talk. Elizabeth arrived in a good mood. She probably thought we were going to help her with her property taxes. Robert, it's been a while, Elizabeth greeted. You seem well. I heard from Jennifer, but let's hear it from you. What do you want to talk about? Well, I hate to be a bother, but I came to ask for help with the property taxes, she admitted. Why can't you pay them yourself? Is there a reason? I'm still dealing with emotional stress and can't work. With a young child, I just don't have the money for the taxes. So you can't handle unexpected expenses. Exactly. The property taxes are way too high. After all, it was you guys who decided we should buy that house on that land, so it's your responsibility to help us out. Why? You had the money in the first place. I'm a single mom, and it's tough. Survivor's benefits alone don't cut it. I'm barely making ends meet and can't handle sudden expenses like taxes. You're lying about not having money, Robert retorted. I'm not. I lost a breadwinning husband. Are you out of touch with reality? If you think I don't know anything, Robert said something rather cryptic. Hearing those words, Elizabeth's expression changed slightly. Whoa, you're scaring me, Robert. You're getting more than just survivor benefits, aren't you? What are you talking about? That's all I get, she defended. It's pointless to lie. I know everything. You're getting money from life insurance too. Elizabeth remained silent. My brother had life insurance, you know. He was insured for about $1,000 a month until about age 60. So, as his wife, it's my right to receive that money. You have no right to question me. But you do get a good amount of money every month with survivor's benefits and the insurance money, don't you? It's still not enough for everyday living. We have a mortgage. You've paid off the mortgage, haven't you? Don't you also get various other forms of assistance? How do you know all this? My brother consulted with me about everything, especially financial matters. So I know it all. I see. But like I said before, I'm his wife, and Emily is his daughter. How we use that money is none of your business. Fair point. But since money is coming in, You should manage it properly and pay your own taxes. Robert, you work for a big corporation and you're rich. Why can't you just help us out a little? You're being too stingy. Elizabeth still seemed unconvinced, listening to this conversation. I finally understood why Elizabeth, even after losing her husband, continued to live lavishly without working. I couldn't complain. Money was something her late husband left for her. But Robert wasn't done talking, and that's when I learned an unbelievable fact. So earlier, you said the kid is James's. Is that true? What are you talking about? Of course it is. Well, that's good because if it's not, we have a big problem. Isn't that quite rude? I just lost my husband. Don't start accusing me of things. I, who had been silently listening, quickly interjected. That's crossing the line, man. But Robert continued. You see, my brother consulted me when he found out about their pregnancy. What about him? He said that judging by the due date, there's no way the child could be his. What do you mean? He was always on an extended business trip and hadn't been home during that time. He was worried that the child might not be his. That's absurd. I thought so too initially. James said there was no evidence of an affair. Then he passed away before we could gather any. So it was a misunderstanding, right? After James was gone, I couldn't shake off the thought. So I investigated. What? Whether you had been unfaithful. My jaw dropped next to me in a state of shock from this newfound information. Robert continued speaking to Elizabeth. I was planning to take my time gathering evidence, but since you came to our home, I hurried my investigation. And what did you find? You're living with another man now, aren't you? So what if I am? He's someone I started seeing after my husband passed. I see. I was wondering if the man you're living with is the child's father. But it turns out he's not Emily's father. It's your brother, H. Do you have any proof? Sorry to say, I approached Emily and the man at the park and got a single hair strand from their clothing. That's creepy. I do feel a bit guilty, but it's for my brother. And what did you do with it? James is no longer with us. So I submitted the hair, along with mine, for a DNA test. According to Robert, even if it's not from the father, a close relative can provide enough genetic information for a paternity test. Robert went on. The test showed that Emily is not James's child. Elizabeth looked down, unable to speak. Then she finally spoke, almost in a whisper. So what does that mean? It's heartbreaking for James. Speaking ill of the dead accomplishes nothing, maybe. But since my brother can't find justice, I plan to file a lawsuit against you and your lover for damages. What are you talking about? We're getting married soon. Oh, really? Well, that makes things easier. Since the house is already paid off, you should just sell it. Then you can use that money to pay for both your compensations. Why should I? If you can afford the compensation, you're welcome to stay. But your fiancé doesn't work right. How do you know that? You can get by without working now. But that changes when you're married. It's none of your business. The conversation was far from over, and an angry Elizabeth tried to leave. Robert spoke up. I'll handle the property taxes for you. I'll also start the process for selling the house. Angry, Elizabeth stormed off and eventually sold the house, just as Robert suggested. The house sold quickly due to its desirable location and being relatively new. Elizabeth paid the compensation with the money from the sale. Apparently, Elizabeth and her man got married. But because of that, she would no longer receive the survivor's benefits she had been getting due to her husband's passing. Ignorant Elizabeth had no clue about this. She bought a cheap used house with the money from the sale. No longer a single mom, her financial aid dried up, as did the survivor's benefits. Both Elizabeth and her new husband had to start working. Elizabeth, once a spender on fashion and beauty, marked the start of a tougher life. Her husband couldn't keep a job, and the marriage soon fell apart. Elizabeth was back to being a single mom, but now with no financial aid coming in, she had to work desperately to make ends meet. For us, the storm has passed, and our peaceful days have returned. We were even blessed with a child we had longed for. I can't wait to meet the child that I will have with my beloved Robert. We will give our child the middle name of my late brother-in-law, ensuring that his memory will always be with us. In my second update, I confronted my ex, expressing my decision not to reconcile and notifying him of my intention to file for full custody. I anticipated he would understand, considering his previous admission of not being ready for marriage or kids. I believed he should have felt grateful that I wasn't pushing him into an unprepared role. However, he reacted poorly, engaging in arguments and insisting I couldn't do this to him. He suggested that breaking up was acceptable, but taking his kids away wasn't. This argument might have made sense in a typical relationship, but our circumstances were far from ordinary. As you already know, my ex had initially opposed having kids, and until a week ago, he wasn't ready to be a father. Suddenly, he was fiercely fighting for custody, raising suspicions of external influence, likely from his controlling parents. During our argument at a restaurant, I attempted to calm him down, embarrassed by the scene he was causing. In an effort to avoid a protracted custody battle that I couldn't afford financially or energetically, I sought a rational conversation. I knew his parents could afford top-notch lawyers, potentially dragging out the legal process. My approach was to reason with him and hope he wouldn't contest custody. I reminded him of his previous stance on not being ready for kids until a week ago, asserting that my proposed arrangement was in the best interest of all involved. I suggested he could live his life unburdened by marriage and kids, while I took care of our children. However, he claimed to have changed his mind, asserting he was now ready to be a father. This sudden shift seemed suspicious, leading me to inquire further. He admitted that his parents pressured him to fight for custody after they learned about the canceled wedding. They accepted that I wouldn't marry him but insisted on joint custody to retain a connection with their grandchildren. Threatened with disinheritance, he begged me to agree to joint custody, but I was disgusted and chose to leave. I couldn't fathom that once again, he was succumbing to his parents' influence, even when I had given him an easy way out. He didn't want to be a father or commit to me. His primary concern was his parents' wealth, driving him to such lengths. If his sole focus was their money, I didn't want him anywhere near our kids. They deserved better. Rejecting child support, I made it clear I didn't want him involved with me or my children. His lack of backbone, willing to do anything to stay in his parents' good graces, was disappointing but unsurprising. Since then, I blocked him everywhere, refusing to engage in any communication. His last message proposed a joint custody agreement with the promise of splitting his inheritance once his parents passed away, an absurd suggestion that revealed his true priorities. Falling for a spoiled individual was my mistake, as a self-made woman who worked hard for everything. Despite his initial efforts to change, it became evident that he was a skilled actor who had deceived me for 3 years. Now, I see him for who he truly is, and I have no interest in exploring more about him. I am done and content with raising my kids on my own. No father is better than one who rejects fatherhood. I am confident that I made the right decision, hoping he comes to his senses and terminates his parental rights rather than dragging this into a prolonged custody battle. I'll continue praying. Update 3. Hello, everyone. It's been a while, and I'm here to share some good news. Although it's been a lengthy period since the last update, I've been occupied. First and foremost, my babies and I have moved into a smaller apartment that I can now call mine. Unlike the house I shared with my ex, this place is near my parents' house. So my parents can visit occasionally to keep an eye on the kids. Additionally, I've hired a full-time nanny to assist me because I can't afford to stop working. I consider myself incredibly fortunate to be able to afford such help right now. Financially, my parents are providing support, and I am immensely grateful for their assistance. None of us saw this situation coming, but they're doing their best, and I'm truly appreciative of having such loving and supportive parents. Now, onto the part I know people are curious about, my ex. Well, he has officially signed away his parental rights. I can't pinpoint exactly what prompted this change, but my best guess is that he decided to stand up to his parents, or perhaps they finally relented. According to a friend, he has moved out of his previous residence, indicating a shift in his circumstances. He apologized to me once again and expressed a desire to offer financial compensation. However, I declined, as I had no intention of accepting money from my ex-boyfriend. Despite potential criticism for this decision, I remained steadfast. While I've forgiven him, it doesn't mean I have to accept any form of compensation. I simply want to move on, and with my parents' support, we are fully capable of raising my kids without his involvement. I conveyed to him that it was okay, but requested no further contact, a boundary he has respected so far. Currently, my focus is solely on my kids, striving to provide them with the best life possible. I have no time for sadness or anger towards my ex. My energy is devoted to being the best mother I can be for my children. That's the update for now, and stay tuned for more stories from Argo relationships. Second story. My name is Jennifer, and I'm married to Robert. Robert has a younger brother named James, who is 3 years younger than him. The woman James brought home as his future wife, Elizabeth, turned out to be surprisingly inappropriate. "Hey, I'm getting married," James said with genuine happiness, introducing us to his fiancée. "Hi, I'm Elizabeth. Nice to meet you." Elizabeth was a flashy dresser adorned in designer brands, her bold makeup making her initially intimidating. However, after talking to her, we discovered she was outgoing and charming. We were genuinely happy for our brother-in-law's upcoming marriage. Robert's parents, unfortunately, had both passed away, his mom when he was in 7th grade, and his dad 2 years ago. As a result, neither Robert nor his brother-in-law had parents anymore. "I bet Mom and Dad are celebrating your news up in heaven," Robert remarked. "Look, I've been depending on you for so long, Robert." "I don't expect that to change once we're married," James added. "Don't say that, or I'll be taking care of you forever," Robert replied, and they both laughed joyfully, showcasing their close bond. As we absorbed the sudden engagement news, I inquired about their future living arrangements. "So where are you guys planning to live after getting married?" I asked. "We're thinking of building our own place. The thing is, I travel a lot for work, so we're still undecided on where to build," my brother-in-law answered. Since he often had to travel for work, deciding on a location posed a challenge. "We don't have reliable parents to lean on. If we live near each other, we can help one another if something happens," he explained, highlighting the importance of their close relationship. I concurred, acknowledging that my parents lived far away, and it seemed Elizabeth, his spouse, also had no parents nearby. "That sounds like a good plan," I said. However, Robert and I weren't as affluent as Robert, so the decision to live nearby posed a financial challenge. Though the idea was initially a casual suggestion, they took it seriously and moved into a house relatively close to us. After settling in, we frequently enjoyed barbecues and drinks together, creating pleasant memories. Months later, they received the joyful news of a baby on the way. Tragedy struck, though, as my brother-in-law, elated about the impending arrival, met an untimely end on his usual work trip. Robert was consumed by grief, mourning the sudden loss of his beloved brother. Strangely, Elizabeth, his spouse, didn't appear as devastated as one would expect, considering the circumstances. While she did shed tears, they seemed artificial, leaving me uneasy. Concerned, I reached out to her, offering support for anything she might need after the baby arrived. "Thank you," she replied. But that was the last we saw of Elizabeth. Months later, a birth announcement arrived, prompting us to visit. However, she claimed to be too busy to invite us in, so we left the gift at the door and returned home, bewildered by the inability to see the baby. Our distrust toward Elizabeth grew as she consistently avoided us, citing business whenever we tried to connect. A year passed since my brother-in-law's death when, out of the blue, Elizabeth showed up at our house. "It's been a while, Jennifer. Long time no see. How have you been?" she greeted. Confused, I inquired about the sudden visit. "I came because I need some advice," she explained. When asked about Emily, her response was surprising. "Emily's at preschool. Being alone at home with her all the time was driving me crazy. I enrolled her right after she was born. Oh, I see. Are you working then? 9 years ago, at the age of 38, I went through a divorce from my husband Nick, who was 40 at the time. We had been married for 3 years, and he had been a good husband until a significant misunderstanding led him to leave me. Within days, he served me with divorce papers without giving me an opportunity to explain the truth. Hurt and bewildered, I didn't contest the divorce. I simply let him go. I used to be a housewife, and on one fateful day, Nick unexpectedly walked in to find my ex-boyfriend Joe, also 38, at the house with me. The three of us knew each other from college, and Joe and I had dated for only 3 months before I realized my true feelings for Nick. Joe had come over to invite us to his upcoming wedding in a few months. Nothing suspicious was happening. However, Nick assumed the worst, left without a word, and even blocked all communication channels. Despite my attempts to explain and reach out, Nick drove away and cut off all contact. Devastated, I spent the next 2 days in a state of panic and tears. Joe also tried to explain, but even he was blocked. I believed Nick's anger would subside, and he would return, allowing me to clarify everything. Unfortunately, that never happened, and a few days later, Nick filed for divorce. Feeling helpless, I decided not to fight for my marriage, and as the divorce proceedings began, I moved in with a friend until I could establish my independence. It took time, but I eventually got my life back on track, securing a job and moving into my own apartment. Though angry and hurt by Nick's actions, I chose to focus on rebuilding my life. Even after the divorce was finalized, I was content with the little I gained from it. I attended Joe's wedding, reconnecting with college friends, while Nick remained absent as expected. Life took an unexpected turn when I met Chris, a 40-year-old man, at the wedding. Although sparks flew, I held back due to my recent divorce. We exchanged numbers, but didn't connect for a while. A year later, in a better mental state, I encountered Chris again at a work event. 2 years into dating, we got married, and another year later, we welcomed our daughter. Now, almost 5 years since my divorce from Nick, I've evolved into a new person. Despite moving on, I was recently shocked when Nick, after all these years, appeared at my doorstep, unannounced a few days ago. The impact of his unexpected return still lingers, leaving me in a state of disbelief. I never figured out how he managed to locate me, and truth be told, I didn't bother investigating later on. It was a weekend, and my husband and I were both home with our daughter when the doorbell unexpectedly rang. My astonishment peaked when I opened the door to find Nick standing there, holding a bouquet of roses, and smiling as if the past 9 years hadn't happened. Before I could fully process the surreal situation, he began explaining that a few weeks ago, he learned from a friend that Joe was married to someone else, not me. He claimed to have realized he had overreacted back then and wanted a second chance, asking for forgiveness. I was at a loss for words. The absurdity of him divorcing me over a misunderstanding years ago, without seeking the truth, was baffling. Now, after 9 years of silence, he believed he could waltz back into my life and ask for a second chance, the very thing he had denied me back then. Fat chance. While he continued talking, I stared at him in silence, contemplating my next move. I wanted to slam the door in his face, but that wouldn't suffice. So, opting for a more impactful response, I instructed him to wait and return to the living room where my husband and daughter were waiting. Without time for explanations, I scooped up my daughter, motioned for Chris to follow, and headed back to the front door. You can imagine the scene that unfolded. Nick was visibly horrified as I approached him with my daughter in my arms and my husband behind me. I smiled and informed him that he was a bit too late to request a second chance now, asking him to leave. After a brief moment of silence, he turned and hastily retreated to his car without uttering another word. Satisfied with my actions, I felt a sense of closure that had eluded me for years. Once he was gone, I sat Chris down, recounted the encounter with Nick, and we shared a good laugh over the audacity of his belief that I would take him back without question after what he had done to me 9 years ago. I couldn't fathom why he thought it was a good idea to spring this surprise on me without doing any research first. A glance at any of my social media accounts would have revealed that I was now married with a daughter. However, I suppose he couldn't access them due to my privacy settings. Even then, he could have reached out to our old friends to find out what I was up to. Chris believes he's so self-centered that he assumed I would have waited around for him after he left, hoping that he'd come back someday. It sounds like a pretty accurate assessment of his character, even though Chris has never conversed with Nick. It's been a few days since the encounter, and I hoped he would leave me alone. Yet this morning, he messaged me on Facebook from a new account, expressing how hurt he was by my actions. He claimed he genuinely wanted to apologize for the past, but felt I had made a mockery of the situation. He still feels remorse for his past actions, but believes I owe him an apology for trying to humiliate him. AITA for what I did to Nick. Update 1. I decided not to respond to Nick's message. He didn't deserve even an ounce of my sympathy or forgiveness, let alone an apology. My husband was right. Nick assumed I'd still be waiting for him and would readily accept him once he was ready to come back. He had always been self-centered, a trait I had overlooked before marrying him. There were red flags I ignored, like his discomfort with me being around other guys. Even just as friends, he convinced me to quit my job and be a housewife, claiming he didn't trust anyone else to take care of our home. Despite sacrificing for him, he didn't give me a chance to explain during the divorce. I always felt Nick was excessively jealous of Joe, my first boyfriend in college. Despite being loyal, he never trusted me. After our divorce, it took me a long time to recover and give love a second chance. Some say I jumped from one relationship to another too quickly, and perhaps it's true. However, I'm glad I took that leap of faith because now I have the best husband and a beautiful daughter. I won't apologize to Nick, but I do owe him thanks. If he hadn't left me, I might still be stuck in an unhappy marriage. Update 2. I discovered a couple more details about Nick. It turns out he had deleted all his social media, and for the past few years, he had been living and working in Seoul. Consequently, he lost touch with old friends, including those from college. He returned just a month ago, got in touch with a friend who knew about Joe's marriage but not mine, and that's how he ended up on my doorstep. It's still strange that he chose to approach me after almost a decade of no contact, but I've moved on from it. He hasn't messaged me since I ignored his last message, and I doubt he will. I also informed Joe about the incident, and he was just as shocked at Nick's audacity. My daughter asked about the man, but I didn't disclose the truth, stating he had the wrong address, which satisfied her curiosity. I don't plan on telling her unless she discovers it on her own, which seems unlikely. Update 3. After almost a week of no contact, Nick texted me again. I had forgotten to block him, which was my oversight, but I'm busy with work and not dwelling on it. In the text, he expressed a desire to meet, claiming he doesn't mind my husband and daughter and still wants to give our relationship another shot, insinuating that I'd be willing to cheat on my husband. This was ironic, considering he left me for that reason 9 years ago. I was disgusted by his text, blocked his number, and made it clear I wanted him to leave me alone. His delusional belief that I still have feelings for him is baffling, and I find his messages repulsive. Update 4. Some accusations suggest I'm still into Nick, which is not true. I hate him, and I believe it's a natural sentiment given our history. I shared the text with Chris because I value honesty in my marriage, and I would never jeopardize it by engaging in any such behavior. I love Chris more than anything and would never knowingly let Nick back into my life. I acknowledge my habit of not checking who's at the door when my husband is home, and I'm working on changing that. Nevertheless, I would never intentionally welcome Nick back into my life. I have no desire to have him back in my life, so it's disheartening that people are making such accusations. I hope this clarifies things. Update 5. Nick showed up again, but this time, I didn't open the door without checking first. Thankfully, my daughter was out with my husband. I was caught up with work, and when I realized it was Nick, I told him through the door that he needed to leave and wasn't welcome anymore. Despite my clear message, he refused to listen. He informed me he was in town for a couple more weeks before leaving for another country, stating that this would be convenient for us to get together. I was appalled by his suggestion to cheat on my husband and gave him 3 seconds to leave. When he didn't take it seriously, I called the police and they had to intervene. My daughter wasn't present, but I immediately informed my husband, Chris, who returned within an hour to ensure my well-being. I felt a bit shaken by the incident, but I'm okay. I don't know how he found out where I live. The friend who informed him about Joe being married wasn't close enough to me to know my marital status or address. I feel uneasy and uncomfortable in my own home. I'm fortunate that he's here for only a few more weeks, and I'm relying on that to keep him away. However, I'm more concerned about my daughter's safety. While he doesn't seem dangerous yet, I wouldn't put it past him. Even during the police intervention, he begged for one chance, showing signs of delusion. My husband and I are considering increasing security measures and seeking advice from his uncle, who works in the police, to address this unsettling situation. Update 6. I discovered how Nick traced me. One of my college friends gave my address to Nick's old friend without asking me first. She apologized several times, but I'm still upset about the situation. I haven't heard from Nick since the police escorted him away, but we're contemplating moving just in case he lied about his stay duration. Chris, and I don't want to take any risks, especially with our daughter attending school nearby. The situation has left me feeling paranoid and anxious. We're still contemplating a move, and ironically, the only thing holding us back is our daughter's love for our home. She has been upset since learning that we might have to leave. Any tips on how to handle this are welcome. Meanwhile, we're trying to find a solution that ensures our safety without compromising our current situation. Update 7. Nick has moved to Canada, confirmed by multiple sources. He's back on social media, and I've blocked the new number he used to text me. In his message, he claimed he believed something could have happened between us the day the police were involved, but implied I was too scared. He expressed a delusional hope that I would realize I still loved him, and that my husband was merely an obstacle. He even suggested adopting my daughter to demonstrate his devotion. I couldn't fathom such delusion, but at least he's gone. I'm relieved I no longer have to deal with this, and that we didn't have to move. My daughter's happiness in staying in her beloved home is what matters most. Knowing we're not in danger has lessened my worries, although we're keeping security measures in place for added reassurance. Chris and I read Nick's final message together, finding it ridiculous that he still believed I would want him after seeing my family. I shared the text with Joe, who had a similar reaction. I'm still not speaking to the friend who gave Nick my address, as her actions were irresponsible and unforgivable. Regardless, Chris and I are planning a vacation to the beach, my daughter's favorite place, to let off some steam. These past weeks have been incredibly stressful, and I feel like I've earned a break. Thanks for all the love and support, and stay tuned for more stories from Argo relationships. My mother's furious voice echoed through the house, commanding me to leave. The intensity of her anger was palpable, and she gripped a kitchen knife tightly in her hand. In her rage, she disowned me, accusing me of being a burden and not contributing to the household expenses. The irony stung, as I contributed more than half of my $3,000 monthly income to the family. Desperate to make her understand, I attempted to explain, but she remained obstinate, brandishing the knife as a chilling display of her frustration. Cautiously, I kept my distance, mindful not to provoke her further. My name is Catherine, a 29-year-old systems engineer at a major corporation. My journey into this career was inspired by my father's love for computers. Despite my successful career, a sudden turn of events shook our lives. My father, the source of my inspiration, suffered a subarachnoid hemorrhage, leading to immediate surgery. Although the operation was successful, the aftermath hinted at lasting effects, raising concerns about our financial stability without his income. While I dedicatedly juggled my demanding job and caregiving responsibilities, my mother's priorities shifted. Instead of offering support, she focused on my father's ability to return to work during his recovery. Witnessing his struggles, I suggested I take on the role of caregiver, but my mother dismissed the idea, citing her busy schedule. Returning home to care for my father, I found myself shouldering not only caregiving duties, but also the entire burden of household chores. Despite her initial claims of self-sufficiency, my mother had neglected the chores, leaving me overwhelmed with the responsibilities. Juggling work, caregiving, and household tasks became a daunting challenge. Meanwhile, my father, though physically weaker, expressed gratitude and apologized for the trouble. Undeterred, I reassured him and cherished the moments spent together. Despite my efforts, my mother continued to criticize, finding fault in my cooking and questioning my commitment as a daughter. Determined to address her concerns about my father's nutrition, I adjusted my approach, preparing smaller dishes to accommodate his changed appetite. After increasing the variety of dishes, my mom remained silent. A few days later, she complained that there were too many dishes in the meals, citing my parents' age and their inability to consume such quantities. She questioned my ability to save money, noting that I had been living alone until now. In response, I explained that I added more side dishes not because she instructed me to do so, but to prevent Dad from getting tired of the food and to stimulate his appetite. Mom accused me of having an attitude, as if she had been constantly nagging and undoing my efforts. Reluctantly, she moved to the sofa and demanded coffee. As I cleaned up, she threw a cushion at me, insisting I hurry up and make coffee, claiming that I'm always at home, not working, and just after Dad's retirement money. Despite my attempts to clarify that I work from home, she failed to understand. In her perception, I apparently moved back home under the pretense of taking care of Dad, without contributing to living expenses, despite my efforts in caring for Dad, earning money for our living expenses, and managing all the housework. She believed I was misusing Dad's retirement money. Frustrated and reaching my limit, feeling sorry for Dad but unable to continue living in the same house, I accompanied him to physical therapy a few days later. The doctor's encouragement was overshadowed by the sight of Mom hastily leaving home with large bags upon our return. The next day, I discovered that all my cherished bags and accessories were gone. Confronting Mom, I questioned if she had entered my room. Justifying her actions, she claimed it was her house, and she could enter any room. I inquired about a luxury brand bag she had, criticizing her spending on such items despite advising me not to waste money. Angry and upset, I learned that she had sold my bags and accessories without consulting me. The significant amount of money was used for her own hobbies. Shouting in frustration, I demanded the return and repayment. However, my mom, transformed into a figure of anger, yelled back, unable to believe her own daughter was talking back, resembling a confrontation with a demon. During my childhood, I obediently listened to my parents and worked hard for them. Now, as an adult, I find myself taking care of them. Despite my requests for my mom to contribute in caring for Dad, she claims to be doing her part while, in reality, she is the one receiving the most care. It's disheartening to witness my dad, who has resigned himself to the lack of care from my mom, still making efforts to communicate with her, only to have her vanish when he starts talking. Lost in contemplation, I confronted my mom, who remained silent. Suddenly, she turned away from me, stormed to the kitchen, and returned with a kitchen knife, a furious expression on her face. In a fit of rage, she demanded that I leave, accusing me of being a parasitic leech, waiting for my dad's retirement money. Frustrated by the realization that my efforts and words were falling on deaf ears, I decided it was time to find a new place and swiftly move out. Slowly distancing myself from my mother, I rushed into my room when she made no attempt to follow. Despite expecting not to feel sadness due to her usual emotional distance, tears welled up, fueled by intense anger. Swiftly, I began preparations to move out. I sought assistance from a colleague at work who had connections in real estate. With their help, I quickly found a new place. During my free time, I packed my belongings into boxes. When everything was ready, I'd opened up to my dad about my mother's behavior. He expressed regret and apologized, acknowledging that he had sensed something was amiss but struggled to address it. He revealed that my mom had treated him poorly too, and he was contemplating a divorce. Grateful for my support, he thanked me and agreed with my decision to move out. A few days later, when my mom was away at her hula dance classes and lunch with friends, we seized the opportunity to move. Movers arrived on a Wednesday morning when we were confident she wouldn't be home. As our belongings were loaded onto the truck, a sense of sadness crept in. In a rented car, my dad and I embarked on our journey to escape my mom's toxic environment. He questioned if it was the right choice, suggesting I could have taken the chance to be free from caregiving. Assuring him it was the right decision, I expressed how happy living with him made me feel. The move was completed by the afternoon, and over takeout lunch we reminisced. I apologized for the convenience store lunch boxes, and my dad shared that we used to eat them often before my return. Even the simplest conversations made the meal taste delicious. After a break, we began unpacking and settling into our new life. Just as we were getting accustomed to the change, the phone rang. It was my mom. I answered the call, and my mother immediately panicked, questioning why our belongings were gone. I calmly informed her that Dad and I had made the decision to move out together. Concerned about living expenses without Dad's pension and retirement fund, she doubted our ability to afford a high-rise condo. I reassured her, explaining that I had a stable job and contributed financially to the family. However, she accused me of spending Dad's retirement fund on designer bags, despite my clarification that I had been supporting the family. I reminded her that Dad had tried to communicate my job situation to her, but she had never listened. Money was her primary concern, and her financial management was careless. Growing impatient, Dad dropped a bombshell. We were getting a divorce. Mom panicked about her living expenses, but Dad assured her that she could live freely without interference. He mentioned sending divorce papers for her to sign later and hung up without further explanation. Dad apologized for making me feel bad, and I expressed my gratitude. The next day, we headed to the hospital for Dad's appointment. Unexpectedly, we found my mother waiting near the entrance. She approached, inquiring about the previous day's phone call and asserting that she wouldn't allow us to live in a nice place by ourselves. Suddenly, she grabbed my hand, insisting on living in the high-rise too. Despite my calm demeanor, she refused to accept our decision. I asked her to let me live my own life, but she persisted, leading me to threaten calling the police. Eventually releasing her grip, she hurriedly left as hospital staff and security approached. I apologized for the commotion, attributing it to my mother's actions. A subsequent argument took place, and as I observed my mother's back near the hospital entrance, she seemed weaker than usual. In the days that followed, she tried to find us around the hospital, but only confronted people she perceived as weaker. After being chased away by security guards and assertive patients, she stopped showing up. That hospital encounter marked the last time I saw my mother. Subsequently, my father consulted a lawyer and actively pursued the divorce process. Unhappy about the divorce, my mother made a fuss demanding money. The lawyer explained alimony, but when she realized she wouldn't receive any, she resorted to tears and begging. The lawyer directed her to financial assistance centers, and the divorce process continued. Eventually, the divorce was finalized, and my father decided to sell the house. Initially opposed to the idea, my mother changed her stance upon learning she would receive money from the property division. After selling the house, our lives became more peaceful. Juggling work, caregiving, and housekeeping, I found support in daytime caregivers, and Dad's condition gradually improved. One day, my mother called, requesting money. I declined, stating that I couldn't provide more and asking her to leave us alone. Despite changing my number to stop her calls, she persisted using different numbers. Later, I heard from mutual acquaintances that she was living in a small apartment, working part-time, and barely managing on her own. Dad, upon hearing this, remarked that she had finally learned to stand on her own 2 feet. Reflecting quietly, I admitted that he might have spoiled her too much. When I asked if he was happy now, he thanked me and apologized for the trouble life had caused me. I'm Chloe, an architect by profession, and in that moment, I was a bride walking down the aisle. Every detail of my wedding had been meticulously planned, from the flower arrangements to the playlist that would serenade us through the night. I had always envisioned this day as a scene straight out of a romance novel, where love conquers all. Jack, my fiancé, stood at the altar with a nervous smile. An engineer, logical and straightforward, the yin to my creative yang. I believed we complemented each other well, excited to embark on this new chapter of life together. However, as our eyes met, I noticed a distant look in Jack's eyes, almost burdened. Dismissing it as nervousness, I proceeded down the aisle. Yet my unease deepened when my would-be mother-in-law, Linda, leaned over to her neighbor, whispering something with narrowed eyes, sizing me up. When our eyes met, she forced a smile, mouthing, "You look beautiful," but the smile didn't reach her eyes. As the ceremony continued, and the pastor asked if Jack took me to be his lawfully wedded wife, there was an agonizing pause before he finally said, "I do." However, his eyes lacked the warmth I had always associated with those words. During the ring exchange, Linda stood up, taking a photo, declaring loudly that we must capture the moment, stating that weddings are just the first day of a lifelong commitment, her words more a warning than a blessing. At the reception, Linda approached me with a saccharine tone, commenting on my unconventional dress and hinting at my rebellious nature, trying to keep the atmosphere light. I responded, "I believe weddings are a celebration of love, so why stick to convention?" Yet Jack's intervention, though momentarily relieving, carried a resignation that shouldn't be present on such a joyous day. As the first dance began, Jack held me at arm's length, our bodies swaying in rhythm but our souls feeling miles apart. The song, meant to be an anthem of our love, mocked me. And Jack's question, "So, Mrs. Chloe, ready for forever?" echoed in the cavernous space between us. Unsure of what forever held, I said yes, hoping the ominous cloud hanging over us would lift. Little did I know, this was just the prelude to a saga that would test not just my marriage, but the very core of who I was. The feeling that something had already come to an end lingered, even as everyone raised their glasses to toast our new beginning. After the wedding, returning to my cozy 3-bedroom dwelling, purchased with years of hard work, was supposed to be our sanctuary. But the walls that I thought would protect us turned into a prison, a stage for domestic warfare. Linda's subtle invasion began, marked by frequent unannounced visits and relentless criticism, culminating in the shocking announcement that she would be living with us. As she claimed a corner of what was once my reading nook, my heart sank, and I looked at Jack, pleading for him to intervene. I managed to pull him aside, my voice quivering. "This is our home, and we should have discussed this before any decision was made." He looked at me, his eyes void of the love I thought I had seen just a few months ago. "Mom's getting older, Chloe. She shouldn't be alone. She should be with family," he said, emphasizing the last word, as if I weren't considered family. "So I'm not family? Is that what you're saying?" I questioned, feeling the hot sting of tears starting to form. "You know that's not what I mean," he retorted, clearly exasperated. "But Mom has done a lot for me, and I owe her this much." "What about what we owe each other? We just got married, Jack. This is supposed to be our time to grow as a couple, not play house with your mom." But my arguments fell on deaf ears. The decision was made just like that. My opinion, my feelings, my home, none of it seemed to matter. And so Lyndon moved in, turning the love nest I had envisioned into a battlefield of egos, tensions, and outright hostility. Every room in the house felt heavier, suffocated by her presence. I could no longer find a quiet corner to read, a peaceful moment to reflect, or even a loving glance from the man I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. That's how I realized I wasn't just fighting for my marriage or my home. I was fighting for my identity, my dignity, and my peace of mind. All the while, a single thought echoed through my head. How did it come to this? How did my life, my home, my choices become secondary to the whims of someone else? My reading nook was now a shrine to Linda's possessions, my kitchen a stage for her criticisms, and my husband, well, he was a stranger siding with the enemy. And all of this was just the beginning. If I thought life was hard before, it was nothing compared to the living nightmare that followed. The atmosphere in the house grew denser each day, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. What made it even worse was the undeniable 2 blue lines on the pregnancy test I held in my trembling hands. I had always imagined sharing the news of my first pregnancy as a moment of joy, an occasion to be cherished. But as I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, eyes red from restrained tears, I realized this milestone had turned into a millstone around my neck. When I told Jack about the pregnancy, his response was as lackluster as ever. "Well, that's something," he mumbled before quickly changing the topic to discuss a home improvement project his mother had suggested. It was Linda, of course, who took the reins of my pregnancy as though it were her divine mission. She began dictating my diet, my activities, and even the hospital where I would deliver. But her intrusion didn't stop at unsolicited advice. She managed to turn my pregnancy into another venue for her psychological warfare. "You're eating again," she would say, her eyes darting towards the modest sandwich I'd made for myself. "Shouldn't you be careful about gaining weight during pregnancy? This is doctor recommended, Linda," I'd reply, mustering all the patience I had left. Doctors these days don't know what they're talking about. Back in my time, we knew how to handle pregnancies, she'd counter. And so it continued. As the weeks went by, my energy waned, but Linda's expectations soared. She turned my home into her personal palace, ordering me to clean, cook, and cater to her needs as if I were a servant rather than a daughter-in-law, and a pregnant one at that. "Chloe, why haven't you vacuumed the living room yet?" She'd yell from her self-assigned throne, my old reading nook where she'd spend hours scrolling through her phone or watching daytime TV. "I've been feeling really tired today, Linda. The doctor advised me to take it easy," I said, my voice tinged with desperation. Tiredness during pregnancy isn't an illness, you know. Jack once again remained conspicuously silent, his compliance deafening. The tension reached a breaking point during another heated dinner discussion, where Linda decided to critique my choice of baby names. "That's a ridiculous name for a child. You might as well pin a kick me sign on his back for his entire school life," Linda sneered. "Enough is enough, Linda. This is my child, and I have a say in how to raise him or her," I snapped, my patience finally depleted. "Oh, so now you're talking back to me." Linda's eyes flared, her voice escalating. Jack intervened, but not in the way I had hoped. "Chloe, you're being emotional. Mom's just giving her opinion," he said. I looked at him, then at Linda, and then at the house that had turned into a nightmare. I felt trapped, humiliated, and utterly alone. I could barely recognize the woman staring back at me in the reflection of my tarnished wedding ring, a woman who was slowly losing everything she had once valued: her home, her dignity, and most devastatingly, her will to fight. And that's when it happened, the ultimate betrayal. Linda, filled with venomous triumph, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "If you can't handle a simple family discussion, maybe you shouldn't be a part of this family." Jack said nothing. His silence spoke volumes, cutting deeper than any words ever could. In that moment, I realized that my nightmare wasn't unfolding. It had already unfolded, and I was living in it. My life had become an unrecognizable maze of shattered hopes and suppressed sobs. I moved like a zombie through the rooms that no longer felt like my home. The baby inside me seemed to be the only living part of my existence, and I clung to that tiny spark of life as my last shred of hope. But even that was threatened. One cold evening marked my breaking point. We were having another one of those god-awful family dinners, where tension cut through the air like a knife. I had spent hours on my feet cooking a meal that I knew Linda would find fault with, no matter how perfect it was. Each critique was a jab, each scoff a slap. I knew another one was coming, and I braced myself for it. But when it finally came, It was worse than anything she'd said before. You really think you're fit to be a mother if you can't even manage a household? What are you going to do with a baby? Linda sneered. My heart sank into my stomach, each word a stab at my already fragile self-esteem. I felt my hands tremble, my eyes blur. But before I could say anything, Jack joined in, sealing my emotional fate. Mom has a point, Chloe. You need to step it up. We're going to be parents soon. That was it, the final straw. A bolt of anger mixed with a lifetime's worth of resentment and humiliation surged through me. Step it up, step it up. I shouted, surprising even myself with the intensity of my voice. I am carrying our child for months, managing our house, and putting up with relentless emotional abuse from your mother, and you tell me to step it up. Both Jack and Linda looked stunned, but I was on a roll. A volcano finally erupting after years of suppression. I'm done. I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice cracking. I won't raise my child in an environment where their mother is treated like dirt. If you two are what family means, then I don't want any part of it. With that, I left the table, leaving them both in speechless disbelief. I packed a small bag and headed for the door, my trembling hands struggling to turn the doorknob. That's when Linda decided to deliver her ultimate blow. Where do you think you're going? This is Jack's house, not yours. I turned around, my eyes locking onto hers. Actually, Linda, this is my house. I bought it, and I have every right to say who stays and who leaves. Chloe, don't do this. Let's talk about it, Jack pleaded, finally realizing the gravity of what was happening. There's nothing left to talk about, I said, tears streaming down my face. With that, I stepped out into the frigid night air, no coat, no plan, just an overwhelming urge to escape. As the door shut behind me, it felt like the closing chapter, the final act of a tragedy that had stretched on for too long. I began to walk, each step a painful reminder of the life I was leaving behind. I had no idea where I was going, but it didn't matter. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my destiny. But the cost of my newfound freedom was high, agonizingly high. The icy wind pierced through my thin clothes as I trudged along the deserted streets. I had walked for what felt like miles, lost in a haze of emotional and physical exhaustion. I was almost there, almost at my parents' house. A sanctuary from the hell my life had become, when my foot caught on an uneven slab of pavement. I stumbled, twisting my ankle painfully as I fell to the ground. The pain was sharp, but it couldn't match the ache in my heart. Limping and teary-eyed, I finally made it to my parents' doorstep. The look of horror on their faces as they opened the door told me everything I needed to know. My breaking point had come, a long overdue fracture in a life burdened with far too many cracks. As they rushed me to the hospital, I knew something had to change. I couldn't go back, not to the house, not to Jack, and certainly not to the woman I had become. My breaking point wasn't just an end. It was also a beginning, a painful but necessary step toward reclaiming the life that had been taken from me. Hospital rooms have a peculiar way of forcing reality upon you. As I lay there, my sprained ankle elevated, and my body checked for any complications due to my fall. I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. My parents were there, their faces etched with concern and quiet fury over what had transpired. They'd always suspected that my marriage was far from ideal, but the depths of its dysfunction had finally been laid bare. Chloe's sweetheart, what are you going to do now? My mom finally broke the silence, her voice heavy with worry. I don't know, Mom, but what I do know is that I can't go back to that life. Not now, not ever, I replied, my own voice firmer than I expected. My dad, who had been pacing the room, finally spoke. Your mother and I will support whatever decision you make, but you need to think about your future and the future of your child, he said. I nodded, having been doing nothing but thinking, my mind a labyrinth of potential scenarios, each one fraught with uncertainty but also tinged with the promise of freedom. It was then that my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jack. Chloe, where are you? We need to talk. Ignoring the text, I switched off my phone. Whatever he had to say, it was too little, too late. I was done talking. My actions would speak louder than his words ever could. My first move was a call to a family lawyer, a decisive step in putting an end to my disastrous marriage. With my parents by my side, we discussed divorce proceedings, child custody, and alimony. There was something chillingly clinical about dissecting a failed relationship in legal terms, but it also instilled in me a sense of empowerment. For the first time, I was taking control of my life, making choices that prioritized my well-being and that of my unborn child. A week later, Jack and Linda were served divorce papers and a notice of eviction from the house. My house. The lawyer also included a clause for a hefty child support payment and financial compensation for the emotional distress I had endured. It felt drastic but necessary, a harsh severing of the bonds that had chained me for so long. When I finally turned my phone back on, I was bombarded by a flurry of messages and missed calls from Jack. "Chloe, please, can we talk about this?" I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. Followed by another message, "I'm sorry, Chloe. I never wanted any of this to happen. Let's find a way to make it right." For a fleeting moment, I was tempted to call him back, to hear him out. But then I remembered the long nights of humiliation, the years of emotional neglect, and Linda's insidious cruelty that he had silently endorsed. Any affection I had for him was now buried under the ruins of our broken marriage. I deleted the messages, erased his number, and blocked him on all social media platforms. As far as I was concerned, Jack was now part of my past, a painful chapter in a book I was ready to close. I knew the journey ahead would be filled with its own set of challenges. Divorce proceedings are never simple, especially when a child is involved. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was steering the course of my own life. A painful journey, but one that led away from the darkness that had consumed me and towards a future that, while uncertain, held the promise of something better. The courtroom had that sterile, cold air that seems exclusive to places where lives can change in an instant. My lawyer sat next to me, a stack of papers in front of her, radiating confidence. My parents were behind me, their moral support palpable across the room. Jack sat with a look of defeated bewilderment, his mother Linda beside him, her face a mask of indignant disbelief. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and Judge Morrison entered the room. The divorce proceeding was a whirlwind of legalese, a barrage of facts and accusations laid bare for the court to dissect. As the evidence of Linda's abusive behavior and Jack's neglect was presented, I watched their faces contort, perhaps truly seeing themselves for the first time through the eyes of the law and through my eyes. The judge turned to Linda. "Mrs. Davis, you stand accused of emotional abuse and harassment. The evidence is overwhelming. How do you plead?" "Your Honor, this is all taken out of context. I was only looking out for my son's well-being," Linda stammered, her voice lacking its usual arrogance. "It appears your definition of well-being is quite twisted," Judge Morrison retorted, clearly unimpressed. Finally, the judge rendered her verdict. "The court hereby grants Chloe Davis a full divorce from Jack Davis. Custody of the unborn child will be given to Chloe. Jack Davis, you are required to pay child support as determined by the state. And Mrs. Linda Davis, considering the extensive evidence of your emotional abuse and harassment, I'm fining you $100,000 for your actions." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as the gavel came down, but it was a bittersweet relief. My marriage had ended, not with a bang, but with a quiet rustling of legal papers. I was free, but at a cost I never could have imagined when I said, "I do." As we left the courtroom, Jack approached me, a lost look in his eyes. "Chloe, I'm so sorry. I never thought we'd end up here." I stared at him, seeing the man I had once thought I would spend my life with, and all I felt was a void where love used to be. "I didn't think so either, Jack, but here we are." "It's too late for sorry now," I said, turning my back on him and walking away. Linda tried to make eye contact as I passed her, perhaps seeking some form of acknowledgement or forgiveness, but I gave her none. She had taken so much from me. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of knowing she still mattered. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the sun seemed a little brighter, the world a bit more colorful. It was as if I was seeing everything through new eyes not clouded by constant anxiety and emotional distress. It was the beginning of a new chapter for me, one written on my own terms. My mother hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. "You did it, Chloe. You're free, and it's all thanks to you and Dad." "I couldn't have gone through this without your support," I replied, grateful beyond words. "We'll always be here for you," Dad said, joining in the group hug. "And for your new beginning." That night, I sat alone in my house, the house that was now truly mine, and felt a sense of peace settle over me. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. For the first time in years, the only expectations I had to live up to were my own. I was still apprehensive about the challenges that lay ahead. After all, I was going to be a single mother with all the responsibilities that entailed. But as I touched my belly, feeling the gentle stirrings of my unborn child, I knew we would be okay. My painful journey had led me to this reckoning, and while scars remained, they were now a part of a story of survival, not defeat. I was ready for whatever came next, not because I had to be, but because I chose to be, and that made all the difference. It had been nearly 3 days since I had lost contact with my husband. Despite his prior notification that he would be unresponsive for a while, my growing concern prompted me to consider calling the police. Just as I contemplated this step, a phone call interrupted my thoughts. It was one of his subordinates, saying, "Senior, your husband has been killed in an accident." Shocked and unable to process the news, I rushed to the hospital, only to find my husband transformed. "My name is Lisa, a 28-year-old woman married for 2 years. We live together, both working for an ID company. Although we aspire to have children, it hasn't happened yet. My husband, Hero, 2 years my senior, is dedicated to his work." I vividly remember the day he joyfully announced his potential promotion. His happiness was contagious, and despite his tireless efforts, I couldn't help but feel proud. However, as the days passed, I noticed a change in Hero's behavior. He started working even longer hours, often returning home well past midnight, and working on weekends became a regular occurrence. The once frequent outings on our days off gradually ceased. I couldn't understand why he seemed unaffected by the relentless workload. Moreover, his attitude toward me grew colder. Despite my concerns, he showed no signs of fatigue. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, questioning the strangeness of it all. Determined to address the growing concerns about my husband's changed behavior, I waited for him to return from his overtime work. As he walked through the door, exhaustion evident on his face, I mustered the courage to broach the subject. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I asked. His response was curt. "What is it?" "I'm tired and want to go to bed early." I pointed out his habitual late-night phone use before sleep, suggesting it might be affecting his rest. His defensive reaction was swift. "What I do with my free time is up to me, right?" Undeterred, I questioned his seemingly excessive workload, especially after his recent promotion. His expression momentarily hardened, and I seized the opportunity to express my concerns about the toll it was taking on him. "You work too many holidays, and it's not fair to make your employees work so hard," I said. His response was dismissive. "I can't help it. You can't understand what I do. I'm tired, and I'm coming home, so don't meddle." With that, he left the living room, leaving me in turmoil. The unease lingered, and one fateful day, after a work-related accident that left me bruised and hospitalized, I desperately tried to reach him for support. However, my attempts were met with silence. Hours passed, and frustration built as my husband remained unresponsive. Finally connecting with him, I explained the urgency of the situation. His response, filled with indifference and an unexpected lack of concern, left me speechless. "I'm sorry, but I'm in an urgent situation." "What do you mean?" "I was in an accident on my way home and had to be hospitalized. I have pain all over my body, but they said it was nothing life-threatening." "What are you doing to me?" His callous reply, urging me not to get into an accident when he's busy and disclaiming responsibility for my car, left me stunned and at a loss for words. I had asked my husband to bring me a change of clothes, a simple request in light of the accident that had left me hospitalized. However, his response was far from supportive. Why should I do that? I'm tired from work, and I have to go all the way to the hospital for some idiot who had an accident because of her carelessness, he retorted, labeling me as the cause of the mishap despite it being the fault of the other driver. His harsh words stung, and he refused to come to the hospital or respond to my messages, leaving me on my own. The abrupt end to our call resonated in my ears, bringing me to tears. It was disheartening to see how indifferent he had become, prioritizing work over my well-being. With no family nearby, I had no option but to procure what I needed from the store. Despite numerous attempts to contact him, 3 days passed without a response. The worry intensified as I considered various possibilities, including the unsettling thought that he might have been in an accident himself. Just as my concern reached its peak, a knock echoed in my hospital room. Answering the door, I was greeted by Yuri, a colleague I typically got along with. Grateful for her visit, I explained the situation. Yuri expressed her surprise upon learning about the accident and reassured me that, despite the severity of the incident, I was fortunate to be doing well. As we conversed, the visiting hours came to an end, and Yuri, preparing to leave, hesitated. Her troubled expression hinted at something unspoken, as if she harbored concerns or information she was hesitant to share. Anxiety gripped me as I nervously questioned Yuri. Is something wrong? She hesitated before responding. I'm sorry, Lisa. I don't think this is the right time to say this, but I saw something. I saw Lisa's husband walking with Misa. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. What? When was that? I asked, my mind racing to piece together the timeline. Misa, a junior employee at our company, had been under my mentorship since her early days. We still shared weekly lunches, maintaining a connection that spanned several years. The last time Misa and my husband crossed paths was likely at our wedding. Could it be that they had met then? The impossible notion sprouted in my mind, and I couldn't dismiss the worst-case scenario. Yuri recounted her observations from 3 days ago, mentioning Misa carrying a case. A sinking feeling enveloped me. I contacted my husband's office, confirming Yuri's account. He had indeed taken paid leave 3 days ago. The pieces fell into place, confirming my fears. The man I loved and the junior colleague I trusted had betrayed me simultaneously. The realization struck hard. Had the relationship begun even before his intensified work schedule? Each instance of his suspicious behavior replayed in my mind, and the truth became painfully clear. Subconsciously, I had been calling him repeatedly in the past few days, knowing he wouldn't answer. Yet, I refused to let him off easily, persistently ringing until he finally answered, his voice filled with displeasure. What's the matter with you? You're so persistent. I told you I wouldn't answer for a while. What's so important that you can't respect that? I'm working every day. I'm at work every single day, my husband retorted defensively. Unconvinced, I countered. You've taken a holiday until tomorrow. What on earth are you doing? His hesitation was palpable, as if he still believed he had room for deception. Swiftly, he began to weave excuses, denying any time off. I cut through his attempts to play dumb, stating, I'd already checked with the company. I know everything. Just confess. Frustrated and perhaps realizing he could no longer conceal the truth, my husband admitted, I'm exposed, right? That's right. I'm traveling with Misa. If you understand, don't interrupt me, ugly. His callous words stung. When I pressed further, he callously added, I'll divorce you when I get back. Don't bother me. The phone call ended abruptly, and with it, the love I had for him transformed into intense hatred. The betrayal was unforgivable. Determined to take matters into my own hands, I vowed revenge. However, before I could act, fate intervened. The next day, discharged from the hospital and able to move around, I'd opened my phone to seek legal assistance for revenge. As I scrolled through options, my husband's name flashed on the screen with a call from his faithful partner, Misa. Startled, I hesitated, realizing there was no escaping the confrontation that lay ahead. I answered the phone with trepidation, and Misa's trembling voice immediately reached my ears. "Hello, Lisa Sr. I'm sorry. It's common sense to apologize in person, not over the phone," I responded, trying to maintain composure despite the unexpected call. Acknowledging the unconventional nature of the apology, Misa pressed on, explaining, "Yes, that's right, but I don't have time for this." Before I could react, she dropped a bombshell that left me in shock. "Lisa Sr., your husband died in an accident." Stunned, I struggled to find words. "What are you talking about? Hiro is on a business trip with you right now, isn't he?" I countered, desperately clinging to the hope that there was some mistake. Misa proceeded to share a heartbreaking story. According to her, on their way home from the airport, both she and my husband were involved in an accident. Hiro had been hit by a car, and despite her immediate call for an ambulance, he showed no signs of life. The news was too much to comprehend. I hung up the phone, quickly informed the nurse of the situation, and rushed to my husband's side. Contrary to my expectation of finding him in a mortuary, Hiro was still alive, but seriously injured. The accident had left him with broken bones, and he was now on crutches. Amidst the chaos, Misa arrived breathless. Her shock was palpable as she realized my husband was still alive. Knowing that Hiro was in critical condition, I informed Misa that we would discuss the matter at a later date and decided to leave the hospital that day. In the ensuing days, Hiro managed to survive, but the accident left him paralyzed from the waist down, confining him to a wheelchair. His parents-in-law, upon learning the details of the affair trip, expressed fury. Despite any personal feelings they may have had, my in-laws unequivocally scolded him, blaming him for bringing this upon himself through the affair. I made a call to both Misa and my husband, intending to discuss the situation. Upon entering my husband's hospital room, I was taken aback by the loud argument that greeted me. "If you hadn't pushed me that time, I wouldn't be in this situation. It's all your fault," my husband accused angrily. Misa retorted, "You're the one who suggested we go that way. Don't blame others. You insisted on the trip, and that's what got us into this mess. I paid for the whole trip. I want my money back in payment for my medical treatment." The heated exchange continued, each blaming the other without a hint of awareness regarding my presence. Frustrated, I reached my limit. With a forceful push of the hospital room door, I took a deep breath and sternly declared, "Stop arguing. This is neither the time nor the place. Hiro needs us now more than ever, and we must support him. You cheated on your wife in the first place. Take your blaming elsewhere." Lisa Sr., finally noticing me, tensed up. Unperturbed by her reaction, I continued, "How can you two fight under such circumstances? Do you realize the gravity of the situation?" Hiro, the first to respond, attempted to reassure me. "Lisa, don't worry. I'm breaking up with this woman. I only have you after all." Shocked, I couldn't contain my disbelief. "What are you saying now? We're getting a divorce, right?" I exploded, frustrated by the nonchalant expression on my husband's face. "You said it yourself. You claimed you would divorce me if you left or had a fight with your lover. Are you out of your mind? I can't live my life with you, Lisa." "Why?" my husband declared, his tone cutting through the air. Shocked, I responded, "I thought you loved me. Don't be ridiculous. You were the one who blustered and said you were divorcing me. Then, when things got bad, you went back together. Don't ever show your face in front of me again. You'll regret it for the rest of your life." My vehement yelling left my husband in a state of shock, and Misa, who was present, turned pale and trembled. Later that day, I was discharged from the hospital and decided to return to my parents' home for a while. Through my lawyer, the divorce from Hiro was finalized. Both he and Misa were charged alimony, which they paid in a lump sum. As a consequence of this fiasco, Hiro was fired from his job. The money he had spent on the affair was deducted from his company expenses, Additionally, his paralysis from the waist down led to his dismissal, leaving him with only a claim for damages against the company. Finding a new job with his physical condition would prove challenging. Word of Misa's affair with my husband spread throughout the company, resulting in a sudden turn of sentiments against her. Unable to bear the hostile atmosphere, Misa repeatedly missed work without permission. Eventually, she submitted a resignation letter. Now the two of them are unlikely to lead a decent life again. Despite their downfall, I feel no sympathy for them. It's a disaster of their own making. On the other hand, I rented an apartment near my office and started a new life. Colleagues approached me out of concern or curiosity, and while my feelings are mixed and indescribable, I aim to enjoy my own life without being pushed around by others. Silly rumors will soon be put to rest, and I look forward to embracing a new chapter on my terms. Second story. My husband Jack made a startling revelation after receiving his inheritance. I don't need a life with you anymore. I'm inheriting $5 million. I don't need you when I have that money. His cold words signaled the end of our marriage, marking the culmination of a long period of living together where I felt like nothing more than an obstacle. Little did he know, a significant secret was associated with the $5 million inheritance. Mom, is it true that Grandpa is in critical condition? My daughter Sophie's unexpected question caught me off guard. The serious health problem of Ethan, Jack's father, was supposed to be a secret between Jack and me. Did you get that information from your dad? The only one who might have told Sophie was Jack. Yes, and on a call from Dad, he told me to renounce Grandpa's inheritance. Sophie's words unsettled me, and because of this single phone call, my peaceful life was about to be disrupted. A few days after the call with Sophie, Ethan passed away peacefully. Since getting married, I had lived with Jack's parents, supporting them when their health worsened. It had been 5 years since Jack's mother passed away, and now, with Ethan's passing, the funeral went smoothly. However, just when I thought I was freed from tension, my husband's behavior changed dramatically. What are you doing here? Why hasn't it been cleaned properly lately? Jack frequently pointed out minor dust and small stains. I'm sorry, I must have missed it. I'll clean it right now. This place isn't cleaned well either. Do you really clean every day? Of course, I clean with the same routine as always. Even though I cleaned just as always, I couldn't understand why Jack was so angry, but it seemed the issue wasn't just about cleaning. Why are you serving this? I wish you'd pay more attention to the taste when you cook. It's hard when the dishes I put effort into are criticized one by one. Even the dishes he used to enjoy were now unappreciated. Is there something bothering you lately? I plucked up the courage to ask, but it seemed to worsen his mood. It's useless to deny it. To be honest, the food you make isn't good. I've been tolerating it because my parents never complained, but I've always felt its tastelessness deep down. Jack's words pierced my heart coldly and sharply. It was the first time he had ever criticized me so severely. I knew when Jack was this upset, anything I said would only fan the flames. My mom always cleaned and did laundry perfectly, and at meal times, she cooked with care without cutting corners. You're nothing like her. I've been patient, but I can't stand it any longer. This was the first time he compared me to his mother and criticized me. All I could do was reflect deeply on myself. I'm truly sorry. I couldn't have imagined that he valued my cooking so little. Jack always used to smile and say it's delicious when we first got married, and his mother gave me cooking advice. To think he has always found my cooking tasteless, tears started to flow uncontrollably. Do you think anything will change if you cry? Your tears mean nothing now. Don't show them to me. Lately, everything just feels so tedious. After saying those words, Jack suddenly stood up and left the house, slamming the door behind him. As he walked away, I called out, "Jack, where are you going? Come back." But it seemed he didn't hear me. My mind was in turmoil, unable to keep up with this sudden change, unable to understand what had just happened. Until a few months ago, we were a couple who shared everything, holding hands, sharing the small joys of daily life, and tackling minor grievances together. I couldn't fathom why we had grown so distant, and then it hit me. I remembered the content of Sophie's call. It was about Ethan's inheritance. There was a hint of hesitation in Sophie's voice that night. Jack had come home much later than usual, and I missed the opportunity to ask him about it. Was there something going on? Perhaps Jack had discovered some information about the inheritance and wanted to keep it to himself. I tried to approach Sophie, wondering why they were discussing inheritance while Grandpa was still in good health. She expressed doubts about Jack's actions and mentioned conveying the same to him. If the way the inheritance is divided doesn't change, it will all fall into my hands. Considering Sophie, I believed this was the best way, recalling Jack's recent cold behavior towards her. Doubts crossed my mind. If he intended to take all the inheritance and abandon me? This thought tightened my chest, and tears welled up in my eyes. In my pain, I became acutely aware of the sounds around me. Just as the room became eerily silent, the sudden ring of the phone echoed throughout. I didn't feel up to answering, but it could be important. Checking the caller ID, I saw Jack's name, the same Jack who had left the house earlier. Picking up felt tiresome, but I also didn't want to face any backlash for ignoring it, so I hesitantly answered. "What are you doing? Don't keep me waiting. I'm running out of time." His sudden, authoritative tone took me by surprise. He was indeed stubborn at times, but he wasn't someone who would yell without a reason. In the past, shocked by his changed demeanor, I let out a slight sigh, hoping he wouldn't notice. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" "I have something to talk about. I'll be home soon. Stay home and wait for me." Lately, his voice sounded unmistakably colder than before. I replied with a brief "okay" and promptly hung up. Looking at the clock, more than 3 hours had already passed since Jack went out. I had been crying, overwhelmed with confusion and pain, and I hadn't realized how much time had passed. After a while, I heard the door open and Jack's footsteps. A sweet scent of body wash, one we didn't use at home, wafted from him. That unfamiliar smell intensified the pain in my chest. "I'll be straight. I want to end our relationship. As a token of gratitude, I'll give you $220,000. His words were something I have feared deep down. Still facing this reality, the shock was so immense that I felt tears drying up. "I'm genuinely tired of you not managing things at home. I want to live peacefully in my old age." Linda had dreamt of a peaceful old age. However, the one who began to shatter that dream was none other than Jack. In front of her, he continued, "Why are you here?" Her words trailed off as she searched for what to say. Jack looked at her with a smug smile. At that moment, a bright ringtone from Jack's cell phone filled the room, the unfamiliar tone clearly different from his usual one. "I'm sorry, but I haven't finished my errands yet." Linda sensed a slight softness in Jack's voice, different from how he usually sounded towards her. It felt somewhat kinder and more intimate. Furthermore, the sweet scent of body wash in the room, the unique ringtone from earlier, and the changed tone of his voice. All these events hinted at something he might be hiding. Linda whispered quietly so that Jack wouldn't hear. I knew it. He had been too overt about his external affair. Considering the inheritance he might be getting soon, the alimony might be insignificant for him, even if his infidelity becomes evident. After ending his call, Jack looked down at Linda with emotionless, cold eyes. "My intentions haven't changed. I want you to sign this document. I'll contact you later. Make sure to have it signed by then. I don't plan to come back to this house. Remember, this house is now yours." Without uttering another word or even looking at my face, Jack headed towards the door. What did our long marital life of 40 years mean? A few days later, I found myself in a lawyer's office, gathering information about Jack's actions and Ethan's inheritance. As I explained everything to our daughter, Sophie, her complexion changed. It was painful to reveal our mistakes to our daughter, but out of love for me, Sophie let her emotions out and shed tears. She then showed strong determination to confront Jack and introduced me to a lawyer to support us. "Hello, I am Robinson. I will be handling your case. I will support you to the best of my ability, said the woman named Robinson, sitting across from me. She seemed to be in her late 40s, exuding a calm aura. Her neatly groomed hair and professional attire gave off a reassuring vibe. Her clear way of speaking provided me with a sense of reassurance. I'm truly sorry for approaching you suddenly. My name is Lily Johnson. I'm a bit nervous since it's our first meeting under such circumstances, I admitted. That's all right. I had already received some information from Sophie, so I was able to talk in detail with peace of mind, reassured Robinson. Based on what I had researched over the days and the information Robinson separately gathered for me, we verified the facts. My husband doesn't have any siblings, so if our daughter Sophie renounces the inheritance, the huge fortune, which amounts to about $5 million, will all go to my husband. Also, his affair with a woman named Jennifer began at a bar they happened to visit, and it seemed their relationship continued for about 6 months. She seems quite different from me, and I was curious about what happened between her and my husband. Through joint investigation with Mrs. Robinson, we were able to uncover an important fact that my husband might not yet know about. Mrs. Robinson then asked me, "How do you intend to proceed from here?" in a gentle tone with soft eyes. "Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I deeply appreciate it," I replied, smiling towards Mrs. Robinson. After a brief exchange, I handed over the fee for the procedures, and I quietly left the office. 5 days later, I received a call from Jack on my cell phone. He proposed a meeting at a quiet cafe, and I arrived a bit earlier than our scheduled time. The cafe was surprisingly empty, and the owner warmly welcomed me, suggesting I pick any seat. I chose a seat by the window to enjoy the calm outside view. After a while, the entrance bell rang, and in my line of sight stood Jack and his new girlfriend Jennifer. When Jack saw me, he smirked with a sense of pride. "Are you prepared for the divorce?" was his surprising first statement. It seemed he was convinced he was in full control. "Is this your new associate?" I hadn't expected him to bring her to such an important discussion, and I was astonished at his decision. I wondered if he was the man I once deeply loved, and whether he had changed because he cheated or if he was always like this. "Are you Jack's wife, right?" "My name is Jennifer. I've recently started dating him," she said, smiling. I couldn't quite grasp the meaning of her sudden smile. "I've heard a lot about you from Jack. Seeing you in person, you do look a bit aged. I wonder how Jack endured all these years. Indeed, Jennifer seems to take great care of her appearance. She looks much younger than her actual age. In her 60s, compared to her, I might look my age, but I couldn't accept the way she phrased it. It's those tendencies of yours I warned you about. But indeed, I did think that. But Jack, if it were me, I would cherish you more," I said. Jack replied, "I don't want you to overthink it anymore. I just want you to file the divorce papers." I was taken aback by Jack's expected attitude. "Hold on. There's something I want to discuss," I said, and a hint of confusion was evident on Jack's face. "What are you getting at? Is it all about your father's inheritance? Is that why, after all our years of marriage, you're deciding this?" I wanted to know the truth behind all these events. "I can't see how my father's inheritance and you are related. That's solely my father's. I've heard detailed stories about your father's vast inheritance from Sophie. I know how much it's worth, so what? That inheritance isn't for you to take." But I'll answer. Actually, more than the inheritance itself, the end of taking care of my parents is one of the reasons I want to part with you. Just a caregiver role. How had Jack seen me only as a caregiver and not the loving wife I used to be? I don't even have the energy to cry. Can we speed this up, Jack? And I want to start our new life. Besides, have you still not let go of Jack? Don't make me repeat myself. I'm not thinking of a new start with you. Now I want you to file the divorce papers. Waves of emotion struck my heart with intense anger and deep sadness. My hand quivered slightly. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out the divorce papers, but my name wasn't written yet. The situation isn't settled yet. To hand it over, you remember promising me the house and money, right? I clearly remember when we talked about it. Yeah, I did say that. I'm a man of my word, so I plan to give you the house and money, Jack replied. You say you're kind, but a truly kind person wouldn't just use their wife as a mere caregiver and then abandon her. So I'm demanding rightful compensation of $30,000 and the rights to the house. What compensation? When we talked about money, it was supposed to be $20,000. You always nitpick at the very end. Your attitude of trying to pay me the absolute minimum is so obvious. But the difference of $10,000 means a lot to me. So, I believe $30,000 as compensation is fair. Your girlfriend, it's Jennifer, right? I thought of claiming from her too, but in lieu of that, I want to settle for $30,000, and I intend to sign the divorce papers right here in front of you. Jennifer reacted unexpectedly, first commenting about $30,000 being fine. Jack, pay it if you're satisfied with it. With Jennifer's statement, Jack finally accepted the alimony of $30,000. Now we needed Jack's signature on the land title change document Mrs. Robinson prepared and the notarized alimony agreement. Jack looked surprised by my preparations, but I calmly said, I have a life to continue, and I eased his suspicions. We took out our respective seals, lined up at the designated spot, and Jack smiled as if he anticipated something. So, Linda, will you sign the divorce papers right now? Understood, I said. Here's the divorce paper. As I carefully wrote my name and firmly stamped it, Jack couldn't hold back his laughter and laughed out loud. With this, you and I no longer have any relationship. Also, I have something to tell you. Actually, I'm set to inherit $5 million, so I didn't need someone like you anymore. Thanks for the divorce. What a foolish ex-wife you had, letting go so easily for just $30,000. Behind me, as I left, the loud laughter of Jack and Jennifer echoed. I hurriedly left and headed to City Hall. My only goal now is to complete this procedure as quickly as possible and sever ties with the two of them completely. They might be laughing happily now, but I wondered how long their happiness would last. A month later, I quickly sold the house I received from Jack, prepared for a new life, and decided to live near my daughter Sophie, who planned to start her life near her husband's parents' home. Since Jack's mother lived nearby, I thought there would inevitably be moments I feel cautious. Contrary to my concerns, Sophie's husband warmly welcomed me and was always considerate, which I found very reassuring. My daughter Sophie seemed angry at Jack's actions at first, but when I told her a certain fact, her expression changed completely, and she smiled brightly. I had a hunch that Jack would soon realize my plan. As proof, I deliberately didn't change my mobile number. The day that intuition became a reality came sooner than I thought. From the afternoon, my mobile rang repeatedly, and sure enough, it was Jack. He called many times, but at first I purposely didn't answer. After receiving repeated calls, I finally picked up. Hello, why are you doing this? I couldn't hide my surprise. What's the matter? You called out of the blue, raising your voice. What's the problem? Where are you right now? I thought he might have visited the house we used to live in, but in reality, that house had already been sold, and the new tenant might have moved in, or it could have become an empty lot. Considering this fact, the image of Jack's panicked demeanor surfaced in my mind, and I felt a little sorry for him. Since we've decided to divorce, there's no need for you to be involved anymore. Where did Sophie go? I can't find her. It seems he went to Sophie's previous house. Of course, she wasn't there, and I managed all the information and procedures related to Sophie's husband's family home, so Jack had no way of knowing. He seems to have hit a dead end and contacted me. I answered, yes, actually, Sophie has moved to a new place. Why didn't you tell me something so important? Moreover, did you know about that too? It seems my husband finally realized the truth. By that, are you referring to the significant hidden debt that Ethan had? Actually, when I investigated Ethan's inheritance in detail, I was shocked by the amount of the inheritance. But at the same time, I found out about a considerable hidden debt. Probably, while he was alive, he estimated he could repay the debt with about $5 million and hid that fact from us. However, he passed away midway through repayment, and the hidden debt was left neglected. And when you officially receive an inheritance, you are also obliged to inherit such hidden debts. Jack was blinded by the allure of easy money and neglected thorough verification and investigation. That was his big mistake. So, I have a question. Did you really know about my dad's debt? Information is easy to come by. It becomes clear to anyone with a little search. That's why I noticed it. I imagined Jack turning red with anger on the other end of the phone. Anyway, what about the promised money? What about the money you intended to return? I had my suspicions, but his real goal was money after all. Besides, about that property. If I had known about my dad's debt from the beginning, I wouldn't have gotten involved at all. I understand how you feel. I thought it deep down, but I chose not to say it. But think about it. Putting aside the money issue for a moment, you got to marry a very attractive woman, right? Isn't that pretty lucky? Of course, I don't know if Jennifer chose Jack because of his assets or if it was truly love. As soon as Jennifer found out about my debt, she left me. I thought she would. It's exactly as I expected. Linda, think about it. How about starting over with me? I feel deceived by Jennifer. I just realized now you're the person I really need. The tone of Jack's voice suddenly dropped and became emotional. I wondered if he has forgotten everything he did to me. I'm cornered. Every day, I'm being rushed by collectors, and the debt I can't repay is piling up. I'm at my limit. I really feel my life is in danger. Help me, please. Even after hearing his desperate plea, I calmly thought, if I were in this situation, would Jack help me? I carefully chose my words and took a deep breath before answering. Right now, I'm living peacefully and am truly satisfied.